The manhwa starts by taking us to a snowy mountain range. We hear a man calling someone a fool, asking if he really thought he could escape the inescapable encirclement. Then, they ask him where the ancient relic is. The man starts to laugh and calls them idiots as we see both of his arms have been cut off, and he asks if they really thought he would tell them. The men start to get pissed, but one of them maintains his cool, saying they need to contact the main squad first, and they start radioing on some crystal, saying they have the Northern Phantom and to confirm their coordinates. He says that he's so damn persistent, and he can't believe that he's still hanging in there, even though both of his arms have been severed. And he wonders why he's after the same relic that the Emperor is. The other man says that he's just trying to be annoying, and that they've suffered so many days because of him, and they need to have some fun with him before the main squad gets here so they can pay him back for the hardships they've gone through. We see the man planning something, and as they keep yapping, they tell him to brace himself as they're going to torture him now. And to decide on who gets to start, they flip a coin. As it launches into the air, the Northern Phantom then bites onto one of his arms, forcibly reattaching it, and he says that he will not let this end with him not being able to do anything. And we finally learn his name is Zeke Draker, and he is the Draker household's first failed awakener. He says because he was born into the great Dragonslayer household with a body that cannot use aura, he failed to awaken, which should have been a given for a Draker, and he was treated as trash and chased out of his household, which is why he did everything he could to become stronger in order to survive. And someone once said that if all you pursue is strength, then you'll have nothing in the end, as we see him charging forward with his sword in hand. As the coin finally starts to land back in the man's hand, he slowly reveals it to show that it's heads, and on cue, Buddy loses his head. As Zeke has dashed past him, cutting it off. Zeke says he always hated that saying because that is only bullshit said by those who are strong. He then turns, glaring at the other man, and dashes forward, cutting his sword in half and slicing him down the chest. And he says that those who are weak will be trampled on by the strong, and what belongs to them will also be stolen, and that is the truth of the world. Zeke then looks over to his side and reattaches his other arm now and says that he guesses he won't be able to escape. The men wonder if he really just reattached his limbs, asking what the hell that is, and they call him a gross irregular. They say that he'll probably die if they cut his head off at least, but Zeke's fearless and charges straight into the group. They immediately swarm him using some kind of sword formation, and then it jumps to later as we see he's actually managed to slaughter every single one of them, but at the cost of his life, as all of their swords are plunged straight into his back. He starts to cough up blood, and he says it looks like he's going to be dying soon, and even though he couldn't take his revenge, he was still able to steal the relic that the Emperor was after, and he guesses he did something in the end after all. As he's holding onto the relic, which is like a dragon statue carved into a gem, he starts to accept his death, telling somebody named Alicia that he's sorry. As his blood starts to run off his nose, it drops onto the dragon carving and begins to release a golden aura. And a status window appears, saying his strong will can awaken an ancient power and the soul of an elder dragon is engraved upon the will of those who persist. As a robed figure appears behind Zeke, it starts to embrace him, asking if he would agree. Zeke's of course on the verge of death and wonders why he's hearing random shit when he's about to die. It continues asking him if he would agree, and he tells him if it'll get them to shut up, then sure. The status window then says the Awakener's agreement has been confirmed, and an irreversible promised power is being activated, and gives him a countdown that starts from 5 and gets to 1. And as it does so, we then hear a younger Zeke saying that was what happened, but after he regained consciousness, this is what he currently looks like, and he's touching a mirror saying he can't believe he went back to the past, and that it's so hard to believe as he can still feel the sensation of the swords being stuck into his body so vividly. And he thought this place was familiar, and that's because it's the Cradle, which is the training institution of the Draker household. The Dragonslayer family Draker is one of the 3 great transcendent households formed by the Terrakan Draker, who saved the continent by killing the evil dragon Bahamut in the war 1,000 years ago. And perhaps it's because they were the Dragonslayer's descendants. All of the Draker bloodline had the blessing of aura, and they were easily able to awaken and become knights, all except for none other than Zeke. The status window appears again, telling him that the administration system is restarting, and he jolts up out of bed, wondering what it's going to say this time. It continues, saying that the soul of the Awakener has been confirmed and it's being aligned, and after having received the will of the Elder, it has been confirmed that he has obtained authority to a part of the system, and it greets him, telling him that it's going to activate its status window. And a bunch of screens start to appear in front of Zeke. He says there are a lot of magic video-like things, wondering if it's all because of that artifact. We see it's actually a low-rank status window, and that his class is healer, which is rare. There's also a draconian skill that he needs 10 points to unlock. Zeke immediately shoves his hand through the screen, and he says that it's just like magic videos and he can navigate through it in a similar manner. As he gets closer, he wonders what it means by class skill, since it's written in the draconic language, which isn't used anymore. And his master told him about this, that people of the ancient world would categorize themselves into classes depending on what they're good at. Each class would train in a specialized technique known as skills, and since his class is healer, he can use a skill for healing. Zeke says after he awakened, they trained him until he almost died. In any case, according to his status window, it means that he's already a healer, and he decides to test it out as we start to see a bright light form in his hand. He says the moment he became a healer in his past life was when he was in his 20s, right after the Ether Hall was unlocked. He then closes his eyes and starts to concentrate as a purple mist envelops him. We see him deep in concentration, and then he opens his eyes saying that he knew it and that his Ether Hall is already unlocked. With this, he now understands even though his trained body no longer exists, he's returned to the past with all of his skills and memories. And compared to who he was before his regression, he's in a much more advantageous position, and in order for him to make use of this, he needs to find out what he has at his disposal. Someone then knocks on the door, asking if they can enter, which startles Zeke, and the voice continues, saying it's useless to act like he's not there. And he starts to wonder how he can even turn the screen off, and he hasn't read it yet. The man then says he's entering, and Zeke yells to wait, but the man does not, and enters, saying that he can't believe he's not prepared yet, asking what he's thinking. And we are introduced to Zeke's exclusive servant named Decker. Zeke asks prepared for what, and he realizes that Decker can't see the status window, saying that's a relief. Decker then starts to send out an ominous aura, asking if he's seriously asking where they are about to go. And Zeke says come to think of it, he was really scared of Decker when he was younger, and while he has the mind of a 32-year-old, he guesses he can't help but feel the fear that's engraved into his body. The status window then says he's activating a class skill called Composed Mind, and his thoughts are immediately cleared, and he says that his nervousness is now gone. The skill does exactly what it sounds like, and it pretty much just refreshes his mental. Some of you need this after some bad ranked games. Zeke says it's convenient that it activates automatically, and Decker says he already told him repeatedly that this is a very important event, asking him if he's even listening. Zeke says of course, as we start to get a flashback of blood on the floor as it's none other than Zeke's. He says that he's talking about the evaluation test called the Pancration. Zeke explains that all Drakers go through a training system called the Cradle, starting when they are 7 years old, and for 5 years, they go through strict basic training. The instructors evaluate the incoming students each year through competitions of swordsmanship, as well as combat of Pancration without rules. The opponents are chosen by the instructor, but there are occasions when the students choose whom they fight, given that they both consent. As there are no rules, there are people who come out of the fights with injuries, or even worse, those who don't make it out at all. But, because this competition is what chooses the class the students are placed into within the academy, the children had no choice but to fight with all they had. We hear their instructor telling them that, as they know, today is the day of the Pancration, and he assumes they're all aware that this is the last part of their evaluation. They all shout, "Yes, sir," and he says they all seem to be in high spirits. We are introduced to the head instructor named Panmark. He says, since they seem ready, they're gonna start right away. And again, the students shout, "Yes, sir." Except, some of them are side-eyeing Zeke, saying that he's here again, even though last year he went through such a bad humiliation, and if they were him, they would have run away. They wonder how he's part of the direct bloodline. The entire time, Zeke can just hear all of them. Panmark calls up 2 students named Aaron and Goder to come up, and then we see them squaring off with one another. While he raises his hand to the air, he waves it down, telling them to begin. One of the students takes the initiative, charging in before, throwing a punch towards the other, who is smirking as he immediately counters with a kick to the chin. Zeke yawns, saying that the fight is already over, and that's what happens when you don't get into the proper defense position. Aaron wins the fight, and Zeke says that he thinks he used to be definitely afraid of this when he was a kid, but these guys are nothing. A student on the other side of the bleacher spots Zeke yawning. He starts to laugh while cracking his knuckles. It's finally Zeke's turn as Panmark asks him and his opponent, Leon, if they are ready. This was the guy eyeballing him. Zeke says that his opponent just had to be Leon, and Leon says that he can't believe he's back here again, and he guesses he didn't get enough of his attention last year. Zeke says he doesn't really care, and he starts to recall the last Pancration when we saw him bleeding, which was none other than because Leon bodied him. Zeke says that he's been his opponent every year, and he's sure he's pulled strings behind the scenes, and he never complained because their household believes that he'd have to overcome dirty tricks in order to become a true dragon slayer. And, he wonders why someone so trashy had to be his cousin. He says in his past life, the 4 siblings of the direct bloodline never had the chance to meet, and there were more than a dozen cousins who were more than willing to bully him. Leon says that he has to give it to him, and it's really brave of him to come out here after what happened last time, or maybe he just didn't learn his lesson because he's so stupid. Zeke's composed mind skill activates, and he says it's been a while since he had to listen to such childish insults, and tells him that he's not going to be nice if he calls him that again. Leon asks what he's going to do, putting his hand on his head, calling him an inferior piece of shit. Immediately, Leon is sent flying from none other than Zeke's punch as he activated a skill called Critical Strike. And, it gives him the warning that if he doesn't land the hit, then he can be countered. Leon starts screaming about his face while holding onto it, while Zeke looks down at his hand, saying that he only meant to knock him out, but the skill got activated when he punched like usual, as we see his ether hull enveloping his hand. Panmark immediately asks him what he's doing, saying that he attacked before he announced the start. Zeke sighs, asking who's going to wait for that on the battlefield, and the ones to hit first have the advantage, while smiling menacingly. Panmark immediately gets cold sweats, wondering what kind of bloodlust that is. Leon tells him that he's fine. But, Panmark doesn't really know if that's the case, because when he looks down, Leon's pulling blood onto the floor. He tells him to continue with the fight, as he's going to make sure that Trash knows his place. And, we see him bleeding out of the nose. What a crybaby. Zeke says that he thinks he's the one that's too stupid to learn his lesson, and Panmark tells him to get ready, and then waves his hand, telling him to begin. Leon starts to dash in. And, he actually starts to just eat the attacks, saying that, at first, he was scared because of the initial punch, but his fists don't hurt at all. And, if he just puts up his guard, he's no threat to him. What he does have to be careful of is his left-hand counter. As Zeke comes in with it, Leon ducks underneath, grabbing onto his inner knee and back, telling him that it was too obvious. And, then he immediately starts to topple him over, telling him that he's about to teach him his lesson. But, then we see Leon take a devastating blow. While Panmark wonders what he just witnessed, as he's seeing Leon shaking hella bad, he looks at Zeke on the floor, speechless, saying that there's no way. And, that the combat IQ on this kid is insane. The moment Leon dodged the counterattack and tried to take him down, he thought that Leon was going to win. However, Zeke immediately kneed Leon's chin and got out of his grasp. That's on Leon for letting his guard down, thinking that he had him. But, Zeke maintaining his composure is crazy. He wonders if this is really the same Zeke Draker that everybody else knows. Leon starts getting a gut-wrenching feeling in his stomach, wondering why he's unable to do anything. He says he needs to create distance before he can even backpedal. Zeke comes in with a thigh kick. As Leon starts to lose his balance, he wonders how he's so strong when his frame is so small. But he manages to stomp his foot, keeping himself upright, and starts to come in with a punch. Meanwhile, Zeke's just happy he was able to control his strength that time, and another skill activates called Heightened Senses, which does exactly what it sounds like. And, as Leon's punch comes close, Zeke starts to see it in slow motion and dodges it. He says that this is a familiar feeling. And, now that he's got used to controlling his ether, we get a metaphor of, as if he was fabric weaving around Leon's hand. Zeke immediately prepares him for a throw, slamming him straight into the ground, using his own momentum against him, shattering the arena. Panmark and the other students are all standing in disbelief, wondering what the hell that was. But, Zeke continues by using another skill called Precise Stab, elbowing Leon in the chest. We see it crack his sternum as the skill stabs the weak point of the enemy for critical damage. Zeke then raises his hand, saying that even an idiot like him needs to learn his lesson, as he starts to imbue aura into it. Leon faintly gets the word stop out, but Zeke doesn't as he hits him in the face over and over and over as everybody watches in complete fear. Until he stands up with blood all over his hands, and Leon. He tells them that this is the consequence of fucking around and finding out. Then he says his head feels a lot better now that he's sweated a bit, and he can recognize some of the people here. He tells them to stop just staring, and to come down here if they have something to say to him. One of the students starts to laugh while standing up, saying he chooses Zeke as his opponent because he's got something to say. Zeke recognizes him as Jackenverdek, another one of his cousins. Zeke tells him that's fine, but he alone is too boring, and he calls out to Jacken's servant named Liam Stone, telling him to join him as well, as he thinks that'll make it a fair fight. Jacken asks if he just insulted him, and Leon's eyes start to sparkle up, and he says, "Of course, dumbass." Jacken starts to get pissed at the insult, and we see him and Liam on the stage as Panmark orders Zeke not to do anything before he gives the go. But Zeke's smiling, saying it's interesting to see him again, and in the future Liam is actually called the Mercenary King. Even in his past life as Jacken's servant, he joined the cradle in the academy, but because he was a distant relative, he was left behind in education, and he begged to join the higher education of the Valhalla Academy, but eventually ended up joining the Knight Order of a small nation called Buraninon. But once Buraninon fell, he ended up becoming a mercenary, but in chaotic times people flocked to the strong. With his long tenure as a mercenary, he became a Red Knight and started his own stone mercenaries. He united the three largest mercenary groups and was soon called the Mercenary King. As the Empire hired the stone mercenaries, Liam entered the Continental Wars, and Zeke along with the Northerners faced Liam as a foe, though it's going to be much different this time. As soon as Panmark says start, Jacken tries a surprise attack, which seems very powerful, but he's surprised as Zeke says he told him a minute ago to come at him together as he's caught his fist. Jacken asks if he really thinks he'll just play along with his cheap tricks. With an overhead kick, he immediately feels pain in his legs and creates a little bit of distance. We see Zeke block through his elbow and he says he should have looked properly before kicking. Jacken can't help but look down at his leg, and Zeke runs forward saying he can't believe he's looking away again in a fight. He then imbues his fist with aura and Jacken puts his hands up to block it. Zeke mocks him saying he seems a little too scared as he then goes for a low kick where he injured him earlier, saying he couldn't even predict that feint. This is why he told him to come together, and immediately after he kicks, he returns to the outside hitting Jacken with a punch, which causes him to spit up blood. As he starts to fall over, Zeke tells him he's not enough. Jacken then calls out for Liam, telling him to kill this asshole. We see him across the arena while Jacken squirms on the floor. Liam then starts to take his hands out of his pockets and Zeke asks how the hell this is a 12-year-old when he's built like that. The most annoying thing about this fight is going to be his reach. He won't be able to do anything if he lets him attack first. As Liam stretches his hand backwards, Zeke immediately charges in. Using his aura to help speed himself up, he starts throwing jabs out saying he needs to take the lead. We see them moving all over the arena as he's using a skill called Slash, which launches a barrage of attacks at the enemy, interfering with their sight. The other students are still in disbelief at Zeke's performance, saying this is insane. Even Panmark is surprised, saying it's only a given that they'd act like this, as they've never seen anything like it before. Northern fist fighting technique in the Midlands where swords dominated. He wonders how Zeke knows it. Meanwhile, Zeke's having throbbing pains all over his body and he says he can't believe how trash of a shape his body is in, and he's getting winded just from this. But that aside, Liam's monstrous physique is another problem, as he hasn't even bothered counterattacking or dodging and he's just tanking them all. But he remembers him being much more aggressive when he was the Mercenary King. Zeke's hands start to bleed and he says his body is reaching his limits. And now that he understands Liam's strength, he'll take him down through his guard as he starts to charge up a powerful attack. Liam, still being cautious, watches between his block as Zeke dashes forward with the punch that he's charged up, and before it even comes into contact with him, we see it generate a shockwave. But because Liam was following it, he easily ducks beside it, pushing Zeke's hand to the side as we see 3 rings shoot out from the attack. Zeke's surprised that he dodged it, saying that he shouldn't even be able to see ether with his eyes, and that everybody here has some insane sixth sense. Liam then grabs onto his arm and his waist. While spinning, he screams going to throw Zeke, but instead feels a sharp pain in the back of his head as Zeke has took the chance to knee him straight in the back of his skull. He then grabs onto Liam's arm, and while his heightened senses are activated, Zeke starts to come in slow motion with a flying armbar into a transition towards some kind of triangle choke. But due to the size difference, Liam is still standing. Liam starts to cough and Zeke says no matter how strong he is, he can't do much without oxygen in his brain. Zeke immediately feels a sharp pain as he starts to spit up blood as Liam is ripping into the side of him with blow after blow. Zeke says if he wants to struggle, he's more than down to do it, as we see both of their eyes are full of determination. Zeke tightens the grip on Liam's throat while Liam continuously wails on him over and over, and we see both of them not wanting to give up and submit to the other one. Some of the students are afraid of the fight while one of them seems to enjoy it, and Panmark is also too entranced to turn away. Eventually Liam's hands go limp as he lets go of Zeke. We see he's passed out and Zeke has a lot of blood on the side of his stomach from where Liam was beating him. We hear the female student who was enjoying the fight saying she expected at least this much from him and that it'll be worth taking him down. There's no way they let him fight after that brutal match. Some time later, we hear Decker saying that he heard Zeke was injured, asking if he's okay. Zeke says yes, and Decker asks if it's not too much, if he could check his pulse. Zeke realizes that he just wants to see if he's awakened his aura, and sighs, telling him to wait a bit. He then sticks his hand out, and Decker thanks him, as he starts to feel a blue aura course through his veins. He's surprised, asking if Decker is a blue knight. As we see him checking for aura himself, Zeke explains when you're usually checking someone who has awakened, you usually just look at their dantian, but he's really being thorough with it, and viewing someone else with aura is difficult enough on its own. If he is able to control it so precisely like this, he has to be a blue knight. And he explains that not all knights are the same. They are classified in accordance to their martial prowess and aura manipulation proficiency. White swordsman is the novice level, and most children before the blessing rite are at this level. Yellow swordsman is if your level has awakened aura and opened your dantian. He explains that all trainees of the cradle become yellow swordsmen after the blessing rite, and once you have freely learned to control aura, you are in the title of knight. Purple knight is a level at which you can reinforce your sword with aura. Blue knight is the level for when you can manifest an aura blade, and the realm of those who have transcended the limits, the realm that the mercenary king Liam, and he had also reached before his regression as red knight. There's also the black knight, but there are only a very few of those monsters in the entire continent. Then he wonders how someone skilled enough to be a commander is acting as his babysitter. But he says it doesn't matter, because he won't be able to detect his ether, as that's something only 2 people in the entire world can use. Deckard then lets go of him, asking if perhaps he is hiding something from him, and Zeke asks if he's hiding something from him, since he's suspicious. Deckard didn't expect the Uno reverse, and Zeke just tells him that he's joking. Deckard goes all out, asking why he changed so suddenly. Zeke says that his question is wrong, and he should be asking why he has only changed now, and that many more things will change from now on, as they're just going into their natural places, so all he has to do is follow him. Deckard bows, saying that he understands, and tells him that he has repaired the training room he asked for earlier. Zeke says that he likes that he's fast, and waves him off, saying that he should take the time to rest. Zeke thinks that if he was ordered to keep an eye on him, he better keep him close, so that he can get information out of him instead. The problem then would be who ordered him to keep an eye on him, and he doesn't assume it's someone from his mother's side, so it must be one of his siblings. He finally makes it to the training room, and he looks around, saying that the household really lives up to its name, as it's pretty big. And he decides to check the system. As he opens it, something catches his eye, as his slash is now proficient, wondering if it wound up because he used it. He says the skill was naturally activated based on his actions, wondering if that means he had it before then, and if he learned something new, will it also be added as a skill? Then he wonders what the difference between a skill and a class skill is, since they get activated very similarly. And the Draconian skill seems suspicious, as he doesn't know what it means by points. He decides to click on the karma points, and it explains that you can earn them by killing monsters. He says there are a bunch of those in dungeons, but he needs to at least be a purple knight to get in there. Plus, he is more curious as to why he regressed to the past, and what this system is. The skill and class thing tell him that it's related to that ancient relic, but he has too little information to go on. Then he decides that thinking about it too much is not going to help, as he struggles to pick up a sword. He says he'll use it as long as it lets him get stronger. He doesn't care if it's the system he's abusing, or if he's abusing another Draker. He says there are 2 known powers in the world, the aura of the knights and the mana of the mages. Knights reinforce their aura in the dungeons, and mages handle their mana through circles. The 2 powers are on opposite ends of the spectrum, so if you have awakened one, you cannot awaken the other. However, he was fortunate enough to be unable to awaken either a dantian or a circle, and he was abandoned by his household and met his master during his vagabond days. His master taught him a lot of things, but the most useful thing he was taught was the healing in Ether Hall. Through the Ether Hall, which his master developed, he was able to handle the energy of nature, and only he and his master are the only ether users in the entirety of the world, as we see him giving his all, practicing his swing. After a couple hours, his hands are now bleeding, and he says that he feels like he's about to collapse, and that it should be okay to stop here. But then his class skill healing activates, and another one called Vigor Recovery, as his entire body starts to repair itself from the training he just did. He explains that healing is a very rare skill that he did not even know existed until before he met his master. If he were to use it in front of other people, they would treat him as an irregular, which is why he was unable to use it during his fight against Liam. He had to hurry to heal himself as soon as he got back to his room, and now that he's recovered, he'll continue training again. This is why healing is op, train heal repeat. It then starts to get dark out, and we see him sighing, saying that it's already dinner time. He wonders what he's meant to say to Decker, as he has left marks all over the training area, and then jumps to a whole week later at the Cradle cafeteria. Some of the people are gossiping about Zeke and how he's changed so much, and they suggest that he might have learned black magic, while other students are saying they hope he keeps humbling the people at the top. Inside of a different room in the cafeteria, we see a whole noble feast laid out, as somebody is going to town on the food, and they're getting to eat steak while the rest were eating much less luxurious meals. It was his cousin who was staring at him in his fight with Liam, Reyna Turin. We see there's actually even more people there, and one of the students says that they might not have an appetite, but they better eat up, as he needs the energy for the swordsmanship duel. This kid's name is Owen, and we see he's talking to none other than Leon, who asks if he's trying to piss him off. Owen says that he was just being nice, but he guesses his inferiority complex is just that bad. Leon stands up pissed, smacking the table, causing Raina to drop her steak, and then she glares at him for interrupting her meal. Leon starts to sweat nervously, and we see Jack in there as well, asking what the plan is for them to do, as they all need to deal with Zeke. Owen says the fight was savage, but also impressive, however he'll be pathetic when it comes to swordsmanship, asking what he can do when he is barely even able to hold up his sword. Leon starts kiss-assing, saying that he had to get a custom sword because the other ones were too heavy, and it doesn't make sense that he'd lose to somebody so inferior, and he's sure they saw it too, that he only won because it was luck. Raina seems annoyed that he's saying it was a fluke, and Leon can't even lift his head up to look at her. She tells him that if he really believes that, then he has no right to be a knight of the Draker household as she walks away from the table. Zeke explains that a sword duel, unlike a pancration, uses real swords, and it is the cause of most incidents within the cradle. It is also where the difference between the cadet skills is most glaringly shown. And, a month after the current final exams, the Blessing Rite will commence, the event where the Drakers awaken their aura. Panmark then tells Zeke to step up as we see Zeke carrying the sword on his shoulder. Everybody laughs, asking what's with that comically sized sword, asking if he's trying to pretend to be stronger than he is. We then hear Raina call out to him, and when he looks up, we see her walking up the other side of the platform. And, they meet up in the middle. She says that she specifically chose him as her opponent. He tells her that that was a good choice, and he's more than happy to accept her challenge. She says that he's lifting his claymore so easily, and now that she's facing him, she can tell that this isn't the Zeke she knew, the one who could barely hold a sword. She wonders if it's because he grew larger, saying his aura seems intimidating, but she immediately tells herself to snap out of it, as she can't have that happen before the duel begins. As she challenged him full of confidence, Zeke says just like how he's always done, he'll try his best, but a duel against the Lightning Knight is quite nerve-wracking. He explains that Raina, also known as the Lightning Knight, was one of the knights who made a name for herself during the Continental Wars. She was also noted to be one of the greatest of the next generation of Drakers. She was the one who awakened her aura even before she went through the Blessing Rite, and she must have awakened it a few years ago. But, she hasn't used it yet in Cradle, saying she wants to improve her fundamentals. Panmark then tells them to get ready as he waves his hand down, signaling the start of the duel. Raina immediately comes in with a thrust. But, because it gets parried, she quickly goes to the outside of Zeke, charging back in now that she's got the upper hand. She thrusts forward again. This time Zeke can't parry it and instead has to block it with his sword, which sends him flying across the arena. He manages to halt his momentum by leaning forward, but still, now there's quite a distance between them, and he realizes that she is better than he expected. But, it's still not enough. Raina comes in, and everybody starts yelling, saying she has to stop toying with him. Jaqen asks if that dude is an idiot, asking if he really thinks Raina is toying with him. Now that Zeke understands her style, we see him deflecting her sword again. Raina says while narrow, she can sense gaps. However, no matter how quickly she moves, Zeke's sword meets hers as if he's applauding her for the attempt. Right after, another gap opens, and it's almost as if he is training her in the middle of their duel, trying to teach her how to optimize her swordsmanship. They clash again, creating sparks, and this time Raina decides to distance herself from him as we see she's gassed out. Zeke sighs, saying that this is how the Lightning Knight fought back when she was in Cradle, and her sword is honest, but it's expected from someone who is obsessed with the fundamentals. But, that is what's holding her back, and he decides that he's going to try to help her break out of her shell as he gets into a low stance. She wonders what he's about to do, saying that the only action he has from that is to close the gap. Her speed is nothing to laugh at, as she tells Zeke to do his best. But, he's already closed the gap while she was internally monologuing, and he comes for a downward strike, which causes her to step to the side. She says as long as there's distance between them, reacting to his movements is possible. Zeke then starts to dig into the arena, and he swipes forward, causing Raina to backpedal and avoid it. That's just as he expected because this is part of his plan, as the debris from the arena hits her straight in the face, catching her off guard. When she then looks forward once more, she sees Zeke's already closed the gap, and he starts swinging straight towards her throat. Raina thinks that she's finished, but we see Zeke's sword is the one flying through the air instead. As we saw, some kind of blue aura activated as Zeke's sword lands far behind him. Everybody says that they expected as much from Raina, and she didn't even have to use her aura. But, Panmark is having a different reaction, and he says the cadets were too slow to notice, but right as Zeke's attack closed in on her, she used the faintest amount of aura, and it was an amount that was barely noticeable. Even though she's the one who upholds the promise of never using aura until she goes to the academy, he was able to force her hand. Zeke asks her what she's doing, as we see that she looks mad with herself. He tells her that this isn't over, as he comes in now with his fist. He hits her straight into the throat with a domestic violence no jutsu. She immediately starts pouring blood out of her mouth and falls to her knees. Leon yells, saying that this is a sword duel and they won't stand for such cheap attacks. Everybody else starts dogpiling on him, saying that they can't believe a knight abandoned his sword and that this is definitely Raina's victory. They start shaming him. Bro doesn't care, he won. Raina starts to struggle to stand up, and Zeke asks if she wants to continue. She says that she hasn't lost yet, and he only struck her because she let her guard down. She then realizes what she just said and stops inhaling the copium, saying if it was a dagger and not his bare fist, she definitely would have died. She sets aside her pride and tells him that she lost. Owen and the rest are surprised by this, because Zeke was human scum just a couple weeks ago. He has achieved victory against one of the most talented children among the famed houses. Zeke walks off the stage with Panmark yelling his name. It then jumps to a castle as below it the city is set ablaze, and the knights are dealing with some kind of massacre, throwing bodies over the edge into a pit full of corpses. Inside of the castle, a man asks another one named Abel how he's drinking tea in this situation and tells him that the bastard Zeke defeated Raina. We learn that man's name is William, and Abel tells him that he's always too serious, asking how long they have until the blessing rite. William says they have until the next full moon. Abel stands up and walks out as we see there's blood everywhere in this office as well, saying that it looks like this is the right moment to pay the family a visit. William asks if he's going out there by himself. Abel says that it has piqued his curiosity, and he's interested in knowing what kind of awakening their youngest is going to go through. Although Zeke's victory left the entirety of the cradle in shock, he simply returned to the training facility and resumed practicing. Then, a whole month later, on the day of the blessing rite, we hear Zeke sighing, saying he really doesn't understand how he managed to become a red knight with such a shitty body in his past life. He opens his status window, as we see that his skills have leveled up quite a bit, and one of them is even ranked expert while his slash, for some reason, is still ranked beginner. Zeke kindly explains, saying whenever his skill mastery surpasses the expert level, the skill ranks up, the mastery resets. He even managed to raise his mastery of swift steps, the skill he gained during the duel. He then asks Decker what he wants, and Decker tells him they're going to leave in 2 hours. Zeke says that he'll join soon, so to get everything ready. 2 hours later, we see Zeke riding away on a carriage with Decker, saying it's been a while since he's been to the main estate. It belongs to the Draker family and is situated within the Duchy of Troy. Although the family's main residence is located in the heart of the continent, at the Four Seasons Fortress in Midland, the blessing rite must be held at the main estate where the legend of the Dragon Slayer started. The carriage comes to a stop sometime later. As Zeke exits, we are introduced to the Dragon's Nest lair, the main estate of the Draker family. Hanmark then yells, telling all the cadets to stand at attention. Zeke looks around, saying he's never realized it before, but all the onlookers are famous people that you hear about in the news. He's sure that his family has also sent informants to keep an eye on him, and whatever their intentions are, once they see him fail the awakening, he's sure they'll just ignore him. But then, he makes a face that looks really annoyed, and he starts to ask why that bastard is here, clenching his fist. We hear Abel greeting somebody, as they ask if he's interested in any of them, and he says no, but he has other reasons. It just so happens that his adorable younger brother is here. And this is the second son of the Draker family, the Lion's Blade, Abel Draker. He makes eye contact with Zeke, who says that even though he has the nickname of the Lion's Blade, it's much more fitting to call him the Butchering Knight. He then turns, looking away, telling himself to calm down, as there's nothing he can do right now anyways. In his past life, Abel would have never come to see him during the blessing rite, wondering if his actions changed the future. We see his hands full of scars now, showing his hard work, and he says if that's the case, this might be a good chance. Hanmark then says they're going to begin with the blessing rite and calls Aaron to come out first. We see Aaron roll back his sleeve as he dips his hand into the water towards a spike. Blood begins to pour out as a blue aura starts to leave the fountain, even enveloping the knight statue beside him, and Aaron looks a little scared by it as he starts to feel the aura pouring down into his dantian, expanding it, creating a vortex that swirls, causing it to flow throughout his body. Zeke says through the blessing rite, every member of the Draker bloodline awakens their sealed aura when it's time for them to graduate from the cradle at the age of 12. Compared to the ordinary knights who awaken after the age of 20, it is incredibly fast. Buddy Def picked up Hep B from that needle. Hanmark calls up the next student, and Zeke says among them there are a few rare cases where, along with their aura, they'll awaken a trait of the Dragon Slayer known as mana inhibition. On cue, the lights all flicker out, and everybody wonders what's going on as they start to change to a reddish color. The onlookers are pleasantly surprised. Zeke says that whoever has this will become as strong as a yellow knight, though some have even rivaled red and black, and they undergo pure blood awakening. We see it's none other than Reyna who caused this phenomenon. Hanmark tells somebody to bring him the gloves, and Zeke explains that because of mana inhibition, everybody who has it requires special gloves from their family, or else they can't live a normal life. When one is able to prove that they are a pure blood descendant, they are conferred the Draker name, and along with that, you'll be provided with the unimaginable support of the family. They keep going through the list. Finally, the spectators say that it looks like they have the main dish now, and they wonder what kind of awakening he'll go through, saying it's going to be another pure blood awakening since he beat Reyna. Zeke stands in front of the chalice, saying he never thought he'd be here again, and the last time it happened, it was horrible. Although the blessing rite was the only thing that pushed him to get through the cradle, he was unable to awaken and felt the mocking gaze of everybody around. But this time is different. Not only can he heal, but he can manipulate ether. On top of that, he didn't give up and surrender but stood up for himself with his own will. That's why he tells the chalice to take care of him this time, as he shoves his hand into the water, causing blood to spill out. The statue then begins to move a little bit, and Zeke looks surprised, but immediately its actions halt. Everybody wonders what happens, saying this has never occurred before. Even Abel's watching, but we see Zeke is pissed, but he says he knew it. Nothing would have changed. It's all thanks to Abel that he became too confident. Everybody starts gossiping, asking if it's possible that he failed his awakening. It looks like the blood of the family head wasn't enough for the cursed blood. They wonder how he beat Reyna, saying it must have been a trick. And Zeke says that these people never change, but it doesn't matter. There are plenty of ways to get stronger other than awakenings. The status window then apologizes to him, saying due to an error processing, a message got delayed. He wonders what it means, as it says that it found necessary information has been found missing from the identification terminal and class information has to be updated using the system's authority. Zeke wonders what it means. It tells him that now that the information update is complete, the terminal has identified his talent as healer and has confirmed that his class is now unlocked. Zeke says no way as he turns around. The red lights that we saw from Reyna now appear from the statue, and they say that it's a pure-blooded awakening, but he's starting off as red rather than blue like everybody else. But from Zeke's perspective, we see a yellowish hue as the status window says the terminal has made a connection, and the ancient dragon's blessing has been activated, as there is now a golden aura emanating from the statue's sword. Abel's face doesn't even make a reaction. The status window continues, saying that the talent of the fighter's blood has been awakened, and now they have been combined to create a new class which is unique, called the Immortal. Zeke wonders what the hell this means. They start to wonder what the golden light is, asking if it's even a pure-blooded awakening anymore. But since there was also red, it means that it must be. Zeke says of course they'll have doubts, but it'll work against him if he says something here. The spectators start to say that the mana lamps are fine, so maybe the sword statue is broken. As there was no mana inhibition, it can't be a pure-blooded awakening. Abel then starts to clap, asking why they are all so serious, as they have gotten 2 pure-blooded awakenings in one batch, and that this is something to celebrate. They all look fearful and immediately say that's right, and start clapping along with him, saying that it's such a blessing. Abel shouts, asking Panmark what he's doing, telling him to get a glove for the newest member. Panmark says yes sir, and as soon as they give it to Zeke, he says that they're actually quite heavy. As he walks away, Abel watches him and smiles. Zeke says his intentions are obvious, but taking his help is something he doesn't want to do. Now the whole situation feels like shit. Panmark says that this is now the end of the blessing rite, so they'll have a celebratory party. Everybody here is invited in to enjoy it. Zeke walks off, saying that he's just going to go find the training room. Abel calls out to him, which surprises him. He slowly turns around, saying he didn't expect him to be here, as Abel asks him where he's going before the party even starts. Abel then congratulates him on a pure-blooded awakening, sticking his hand out. Zeke laughs awkwardly, wondering why he wants a handshake, but he can't refuse it, because if he does, then his hostility towards him will be shown. He decides to play along for now. As he sticks his hand out, he gets a flashback of some kind of massacre and stops himself. Abel wonders what this means, as Zeke puts his hand back to his side. Abel, speechless for a second, then says that this is awkward while laughing. Zeke says even if it's for the sake of saving face, he can't shake hands with a scumbag like this. Abel tells him that it can't be helped, and that he'll have to settle for having seen his face, patting his shoulder, telling him he'll see him again. As Abel walks off, Zeke says that he definitely will see him again, and we see that he's really pissed about it. At the party, everybody's talking about the 2 new purebloods, and that Zeke's golden light was quite shocking, and that this is the first time this has happened. So they all thought it was a failed awakening at first, wondering where Zeke is. Zeke takes off his clothes and sighs, saying that he thought he was going to suffocate in there. That aside, he wonders how he's completely fine in this situation, as all pure blood awakenings have the ability of mana inhibition, which we talked about before. The ability that proves you're in the opposition to the dragons, the source of mana. However, because most machines use mana as their fuel, a pureblood requires the use of the house's gloves. If he was a pureblood, then there should have been problems the moment he took the gloves off. He opens his status window to look at it, as we see his classes in there, and he also has 100 karma points. He says that something has changed, as one of the skills is mana reflection rather than mana inhibition. He decides to sit down and read it properly, as the skill creates a distortion field to nullify nearby mana. He says that this must mean the lamps were okay because it is not a passive skill, and that he was a rare healer before the rite, but now he is a unique immortal. He starts to think about it, saying all the graduates had regular awakenings with blue aura, and as only Reyna had a pure-blooded awakening to begin with, and his was red off rip that turned into gold. The system said that it lost critical information by the classification terminal, wondering if it meant the bronze statue. As soon as the system put in the information, the statue which stopped moving immediately started to emit red light. He sighs, saying that this is to give him a headache, as he now realizes what happened. The bronze statue doesn't determine whether you have awakened or not, it determines the user's class. Red for a rare class and gold for a unique. The bronze statue is an ancient relic used even before the time of Terrakin, the founder of the Drakers. The concept of class doesn't exist nowadays, so it was only used to check if one had awakened or not, and they have mislabeled the red light, shown as a sign of a rare class, to that of a pure-blooded awakening. He sighs, saying he can't believe the family heads have never realized this, but then he remembers he has karma points, wondering if it was a gift from the ritual. He decides to use it, buying the Draconian skill shop. As it takes 10 points away, he now can view all of the Draconian skills and choose which one to buy. We see there are some called Dragon Eyes, Might of the Dragon, also Devour, which all do dragon-like things. Dragon Eyes allows the user to view detailed information of an individual, Might of the Dragon makes those around him surrender to aura, and Devour just lets him be a pig. He says he's going to get Dragon Eyes and Might of the Dragon, but he wonders why Devour costs so many points. He says he better get something that's obviously good rather than take a shot in the dark, so he gets both of those said skills. He says Might of the Dragon is probably too dangerous to use here, so instead he uses Dragon Eyes, as we see his eyes turn into that of a dragon, releasing a golden aura. He looks around, saying he expected more as it said there was detailed information, but nothing's changed. As soon as he opens his window, he starts to laugh, saying this doesn't even make sense as the statue in the center of the garden looks like it's right in front of him. Even though it's so far away, he says this could be really useful. A status window then appears, which surprises him as it asks if he wants detailed information about the object. He wonders what it means, so he clicks yes, only for even more status windows to start to appear, telling him every single thing in the room and how it was made. His head starts to hurt, and he immediately begins to lose his balance, catching himself in the chair. If all Draconian skills are like this, he won't even be able to use them for long. His class skill activates, which is Healing Factor and Vigor Recovery. As he immediately feels refreshed, he says he didn't even intend to use his healing skill. He checks his skills, saying to wait, all of his class skills have been changed into passive abilities, and their levels are increased by 1. The healing factor means that he automatically repairs himself, and he says that this shit is actually low-key broken. Healing may seem like it's already overpowered, but it's not something he can constantly spam and the effects are limited. However, healing factor is infinite. He grabs a knife off the table, saying he needs to test this, and he holds out his arm and begins playing guitar on his wrist. Healing factor activates, as we see there's not even a scar left behind. He says that since the academy takes 5 years to finish, that might be too long, so he'll just do it in 2 instead. We learn that the Draker Academy is the greatest knight academy on the continent, one that any aspiring knight would give an arm or a leg to enroll in. It is located in the Duchy of Troy. Every new semester, there are thousands of new students. We see them laughing in the courtyard. Zeke says that the high-ranked students are no different from adults, and they are all trained to perfection. However, if he compares them to those from the cradle, then maybe they are slightly worse. While there are still children from the great families, it seems they have already established their territory. It seems as if his family is rotten to the core. Among the countless branch families supporting the transcendent Draker family, the 3 families with the most influence are called the Great Families. There is Reyna's family, the Turin family. There is Owen's family, the Zimmons, and of course, Jackin's family. Even the children of those 3 families are in such a state where people are following them around. He starts to laugh, saying that it's none of his business. As he walks away, he heads to the high-class dormitory, specifically the Platinum Mansion. He says it sure is nice to be a purebred. The Platinum Mansion is a dormitory furnished with a training hall, a library, and various kinds of facilities. It is only open to the highest-ranked students, and even those from the cradle cannot enter it so easily. As for pure-blooded awakeners, they are given the special privilege of a floor master, an entire floor known as the Platinum Floor. One of the maids welcomes Zeke on his entrance, saying they'll escort him to his assigned floor. As we see, there is actually a whole staff of maids and butlers. Zeke sighs, saying that this is a bit too much, even if he is pure-blooded. One of the butlers tells him that Decker is waiting for him in his room. Zeke asks what he wants, and Decker says that he's come to deliver something. Zeke notices a box on the table and immediately puts them on, saying it is different from the other tempering gloves that he had before, and Decker says it's a relief he likes them. Zeke says that since he's got new gloves, he would like to get a new sword too, asking Decker what he thinks. Decker tells him that is an excellent decision, and because the Duchy of Troy is close to the Giant's Mountain, it is abundant with good quality iron and excellent craftsmen. It's to the point where people say that the first weapon of the Academy alumni is always a Trojan. Decker says that he's going to go search for a decent craftsman, but Zeke says that's fine, as he has one in mind, and he'll go in person to set up an appointment, as he hands him a note. Decker reads the name out, which is Galleon Halbert, and he says he's never heard of this, but he'll do as he's ordered. He also reminds him that classes are going to start tomorrow, so he needs to review the documents he laid out for him. Zeke says he's always nagging, but he gets it. Some time later, we see him reading the documents sitting down, and he says that given how the Platinum Floor is completely isolated, he'll have a lot more freedom to develop his draconian skills. Then there's a knock on the door, and he tells them to enter, and a woman apologizes and tells him that Floor Master Reyna has sent a dinner invitation. Zeke's a little surprised by this, telling her to take him there, and as he heads to the roof, he spots something that he ironically says is cute, asking if they are some kind of southern cartel. With a bunch of dudes surrounding Reyna, she welcomes Zeke. She says that her family's people are rather peculiar, and she apologizes and sends them away. He sits down, thanking her for her concern, and she says that she wants to discuss business after the meal. Zeke says that she's finally living up to the name of Lightning Knight, because she's utilizing her lower abdomen to control her aura, wondering if she's already laid her eyes on the position of Purple Knight. But he wonders why her swordsmanship is stuck in a rut, and he sighs, saying that it's a waste of her potential. Some time later, after he's eaten about 4 plates, he laughs nervously, saying that he's a pretty big eater, but this is far beyond his expectations. As Reyna has doubled what he ate, she says that since they're done, she'll get straight to business, telling Zeke to accept the Turin family support. He says it seems that she's forgotten, but they are both pure-blooded awakeners. She says that it looks like there is a misunderstanding, and it's true that they receive many privileges, and just the Platinum Floor alone is proof of that. But, they do not receive any benefits in terms of their growth. The centuries of academic and practical know-how accumulated in the academy, a personal instructor to raise their abilities, if he doesn't have these too, no matter how well off he is, he'll fall behind. That is why support families are necessary. Even Abel, the youngest ever to attain the title of White Knight and the current Black Knight, receives support from his maternal family, the Zimmons, that is, Owen's family. Although the patriarch of the Turin family has not told her the reason why, he has told her that Zeke is not receiving support from his maternal family. And, she'll tell him this only once more, that he needs to accept the support. He immediately says no while shrugging his hand, leaving her confused. She asks why not, saying that receiving the family support wouldn't be a bad deal for him. He says it's not about that, and he doesn't need anything more than what he's already received as a pure-blooded awakener. It's not much, but in return for the meal, he'll give her one piece of advice she needs right now, saying that her sword has too much strength behind it, and he guesses that she's too conscious of those men. He pushes into the tree, causing all the leaves to drop. He tells her to listen well, saying that her greatest strength is the fluidity that arises from having a flexible body, telling her not to receive attacks head-on and crush her opponent's strength, but rather fluidly cast her opponent's attacks aside, and land a single delicate strike. If she can do that, she'll grow several times stronger than she is now. Hajime no Ippo type shit. He then thanks her for the meal and heads off, and we see her fist shaking, saying that the Turin family is the herald of strength, and she was simply following her family's tradition. It's not that she's being conscious of others, but she realizes that he's right, because she had been obsessed with becoming a person fitting of her family name. It is something that has been unintentionally projected into her sword as a result, and he saw through that immediately. When she was young, everyone praised her as a genius, but not one person gave her any real advice. She holds up one of the leaves to see that it's actually cut, and she starts to wonder just exactly who Zeke is. As we see Zeke walking outside, he says that all of his changed class skills have insane performance, and he wonders how he is fine even though he stayed up all night training. We see it's because he has a skill called infinite stamina, which sounds broken. He says in his past life he thought of this place as hell. But now that he is a pure-blooded awakener, this place is heaven, and money and power aren't everything. There's nothing quite like this, as we see him peacefully enjoying a stroll. Two people then see him from a distance and call out to him, and when Zeke turns around, we see it's none other than Owen, saying that he's glad to see he's part of the special class too. Zeke says that this is the third son of the Zimmons family, one of the three great families which we already knew of. As schemes are a Zimmons specialty, he used to bully him like the others, while maintaining his image of not having anything to do with it. Owen says that he invited him for dinner last night, but he didn't reply, asking if he received the invitation letter. Zeke wonders why he's acting so friendly, asking if it was the one that was left on his desk. Owen then asks why he didn't reply. Zeke laughs, saying that he must think he's funny, asking why he has to reply to every single thing someone asks. Someone then stomps his foot as he walks forward, saying he's being rather rude despite the young master's kindness. We see a man towering over Zeke. Zeke asks who he's meant to be, and the dude starts laughing like the main antagonist, asking how he could not know him. He says it looks like those from Cradle aren't worth much. Zeke sighs, saying that he gets that he wants to look good in front of his young master, but he needs to keep in mind who he's speaking to. He then goes for a surprise attack, which Zeke blocks, but it still causes him to get sent backward. Zeke says it seems like the high-ranking students are capable of basic aura manipulation. The dude then introduces himself as Durbin Roswell, saying they call him Durbin the Mighty, and in place of young Master Owen, he will teach him some manners. Zeke starts laughing at his nickname, saying that he's a cadet that isn't even a knight, yet he has a nickname. He finds it quite funny. Zeke then dashes off the ground, immediately closing the gap with his fist at Durbin's stomach. He calls him a joke and then hits him straight in the gut, causing him to pour blood from his nose and mouth. Durbin then gets launched flying backward. I think he just murdered this guy. Zeke then asks who's next after Durbin, telling Owen to go ahead and pick up his trash. As Owen starts to walk forward towards him, he says he sure likes to bask in his own glory, and then walks away. Zeke then calls him a third-rate villain, and he explains that Draker Academy is split into two classes. There is the normal class, wherein you are taught that if you lack talent, you must overcome it with effort, and so they follow a strict regimen from early morning till late at night. Then there is the special class, who may choose their subjects freely outside of basic studies. Even within the academy, the place where the greatest of the elites gather is the special class, which is why he had some kind of expectations. But everybody here are just alumni of the Cradle, and he wonders why it was called the special class when it's just the Cradle class. A teacher then tells them all to be quiet, saying in order to encourage the special class's freshmen, someone very special has come today. Not only was he the commander-in-chief during the Eastern Empire War 20 years ago, but he was also the hero that stopped the Empire's invasion with their resourcefulness alone. He tells them all to welcome in Chief Dean Howard Draker. Howard says it's a pleasure to meet them all, and he's also the dean of the academy. He's also a war hero, and everybody praises as a tactical genius, but the truth is that the information he leaked to the enemy for the sake of his own survival just happened to throw them into chaos, and he's simply a traitor that got lucky. Zeke sighs, saying that Rat is no hero, rather he's the main perpetrator that got him kicked out of the academy. He's lost the only remaining place where he could belong, and ended up wandering all across the Duchy of Troy, eventually getting caught by slave traders, then being sold off to the Southern Cartel, and he will make sure to repay General Lardass. The teacher says that he believes all of them have taken the dean's words to heart. Now they'll begin basic classes immediately, telling them to get their swords and head to the arena. They make their way to the indoor arena that is only for their class. Zeke says who would have thought that they have to learn the basics of dragon slaying. In his past life, simply because of the fact that he could not use aura, he spent 2 years learning what would otherwise take a person 3 months. He sighs, telling the world to go easy on him. A man then welcomes all the cadets, introducing himself as Andre Draker, saying he's going to be teaching them the dragon slaying basics. Some of the cadets start asking who he is, saying he's so young yet he's wearing the formal Draker uniform, but Zeke recognizes him, saying that despite not being a pure-blooded awakener, he graduated early from the academy, and then graduated from Valhalla as a valedictorian. He's a once-in-a-century genius that was awarded the Draker name, despite not being of the lineage. Even the special classes teachers sure are on a different level. He's also very famous for being very inflexible. Andre then tells everybody to be quiet while releasing Bloodlust, saying that if they're done yapping, he's going to begin the class, telling them to draw their blades. As they start to do it, he spots something, asking Zeke what's with his comically large sword. Zeke whips it out, even doing some tricks with it, saying that as he can see, this is the sword he'll be using. Andre looks pissed, telling him to step into the arena. He asks if he's not aware of the fact that he must pick a sword that suits his body. Zeke sighs, saying he knew this was going to happen, but he wanted to make sure he stood out when drawing his sword. Zeke then taunts Andre, telling him he's sure he can beat him with the sword. Zeke says it's just going to be faster to show him his skills, but Andre is pissed. He starts to release Bloodlust, but due to Zeke's class skill, his mental is unbreakable. Andre goes to draw his blade, telling him that he understands that he wishes to learn with his body. Zeke says that he's glad he bit the bait, and Andre says that if his blade so much as touches his body, he'll be exempt from not just the punishment for his rudeness. As we see him with a rose aura on his blade, which suits his nickname. He tells him that he will also be exempt from the Dragon Slaying Basics class. Andre then tells him that he doesn't plan on using aura against the cadets, but Zeke's just happy that he's getting a class exemption, saying that he can beat Andre since he knows his weakness. But considering Abel's keeping an eye on him, it'd be dangerous for him to garner attention like he did back at the Cradle, so he'll just graze his clothes and lose. He starts to ready his blade, telling Andre that he's ready, while dashing forward. He slices towards Andre's neck in a blink. Andre deflects it, and Zeke says, as expected of a blue knight, this isn't going to be easy. We see sparks flying as Zeke's bouncing around, but this isn't the technique he used against Reina. While Andre hasn't moved a single step, the cadets say that an official knight sure is on a whole different level, as Zeke hasn't even managed to graze his clothes for the last 30 minutes. Zeke then distances himself from Andre, whose hand is starting to shake, and he asks what the deal is with his ridiculous stamina, saying even if he is suppressing his aura, to think that he's losing to a cadet. He says the existence of pure bloods truly is unfair. Zeke says that his stamina is just as bad as always, and him suppressing his own mana isn't helping. The Draker's aura cultivation method is known for its peculiarity. You must activate your aura during training, during your daily basic task, pretty much every second of every day, maintaining it as if you were breathing. In other words, for Andre, he's basically holding his breath. Unique total swordsmanship depletes his stamina even further. As we see him send Zeke flying backward, Zeke says that losing like this doesn't feel quite right. As there's no helping it now, he has to force him to use aura, as he comes in with an overhead swing which Andre blocks. Zeke says that creating situations that can be easily handled is useless. He needs something that'll make him subconsciously use aura. In other words, an extreme situation to drive that out of him. As he flips through the air, he lands back on his feet, only to dash off the floor directly towards Andre. And Andre's surprised as he recognizes it as swift steps, saying there's no way it's this fast from a cadet, as Zeke bounces around the room like Bellamy from One Piece. Zeke then activates critical strikes right above Andre's head, while Andre's still just wondering how a cadet knows swift steps. He then turns, meeting Zeke's gaze, only to feel that he's about to be injured. We see blue aura envelop his feet as he backpedals from the attack, raising his sword up into the air. As he's preparing for a counterattack, he uses the dragon-slaying arts, specifically the first chapter, Sky Slice. As aura starts to wrap and envelop his blade, he swings down towards Zeke, who smiles while putting his sword up, blocking the attack, which sends him flying away. That attack was clean. Owen and his gang are smiling, while Reina looks worried. Zeke's sword now has a giant dent in it, almost on the verge of breaking, and he says that shit really hurt, as his healing factor starts activating. He then says that now he can collapse as he lets go of his sword. Andre now, realizing what he has done, sheaths his blade and starts to walk away, telling them that this cadet no longer needs to attend class, as he's frustrated at himself for doing this to a cadet. He asks if there's anyone else who wishes to be exempt, but nobody speaks up, and he starts to release even more bloodlust, saying that he'll take that as a no. He tells them to then lift their swords, as they're going to start from the beginning. Zeke then wakes up in the hospital, saying that it was an Oscar-winning performance. While he didn't graze his clothes, he got Andre to use the aura that he said he wouldn't use. Andre got disciplined, and he obtained free time, so it's a win-win. He says that Andre's Sky Slice attack was the most basic move of the dragon-slaying arts. However, because it came from a blue knight, its force was nothing short of incredible, but regardless he can still beat a blue knight, considering his limitless stamina and healing. But this isn't enough to live freely. In order not to be restricted, he needs unrestrainable power, the power that won't let him submit to anyone. As he starts to explain it, a drunkard appears beside him, saying that he must be Arthur's youngest son. Zeke's surprised, asking who the hell this hobo is. The dude tells Zeke that his eyes aren't the same as Arthur's, but Zeke just wonders who he is, as he couldn't even smell the beer, even though this dude reeks of it. And he's also calling Arthur an arrogant bastard, so he asks him who he is. The man asks him how he did that earlier, and he starts chugging even more beer, and Zeke asks what he's talking about. The dude sets his glass on the table, asking why he's feigning ignorance, saying he was inflicted with an internal wound earlier, asking how it healed instantaneously. Zeke wonders if he caught on to his healing factor, and then his mental block skill activates, and he reminds himself not to fall for it, as there's no way somebody would know of healing at the academy. So he tells the man he doesn't know what he's talking about. The man asks why he's keeping up this charade. Then immediately, the drunkard swings his hand towards Zeke's head, almost cutting it off without a sword. Zeke wonders if he is an assassin. Grabbing onto the bedsheets, he throws it forwards, blocking the man's vision, who compliments him, saying that this kid's got tricks. Zeke says that his instincts are screaming at him, that if he doesn't kill him, he'll be the one to die instead, as he uses swift steps, precise stab, and critical strike all at the same time. The man doesn't even dodge the attack, but simply grabs onto his blade, making Zeke realize now that he's in some serious trouble. The dude says that his ability to adapt to the situation is impressive, almost as if he was a mercenary. He starts glaring at Zeke, while Zeke wonders why the final boss appeared. The drunkard then moves the bedsheet as Zeke backpedals. He wonders who this guy is and why he called him a mercenary, suggesting maybe he knows something about his last life. The man says that it's funny to see a Draker abandon his sword, and step back, then flicks it back towards him, saying that he thinks that he is more suited to be a mercenary than a knight. Zeke now realizes that's what he meant, saying he's never felt this since his master, and he's sure of it after their brief engagement that there is an overwhelming gap between their abilities so much that if he wanted to, he could easily kill him, meaning that he's at least a red knight. The drunkard says that's a claymore from the basic supply of the cradle, asking why he's using a weapon like that, and Zeke says he might actually be stronger than a red knight. The door then cracks open as we hear Andre's voice saying that this is where he was. Zeke wonders if he's talking to him, but Andre gives him one quick glance and then calls out to the other man, who we learn is named Dexter, and he is the garden keeper. Dexter asks how he knew he was in here, calling him a leech-like bastard, and Andre says that he was in the training room earlier, making Dexter call him annoying. Andre tells Zeke that if he's done getting treated, he can return, and Zeke walks out. As he heads to the door, Dexter calls out to him, saying that if he has time, come to the Academy's Western Greenhouse and he'll teach him something useful. Awkward silence ensues as they stare at each other, and Zeke leaves, saying no thanks. Dexter then says that it seems like his personality is just as shitty as Arthur's, and then Zeke says that if Dexter has the rank to call the current patriarch Arthur out so easily, then he must be the person who only had one disciple, which was Andre, throughout his entire life, and that he is Duke Draker, the Gale Knight, one of the Black Knights who have the martial force to go against a whole kingdom alone. Why are the drunkards always powerhouses? Zeke says that he was quite the talk of the town for disappearing one day without a word, but to think he was leading a secluded life at the academy, and perhaps Andre is only here because of him. Some people say that the Duke was a person known for having a very scary tenacity, as there is a rumor that Dexter obtained Black Knight status only because he liked the color black. Dexter is showing a strong interest in him, but receiving light teaching to simply interest him is something that he doesn't want to partake in. If he's going to learn something, it should be at least his secret moves. He wants to make Dexter's interest in him be at its absolute limit. It then jumps to the actual academic side of the school, as the magic theory professor Fanon is asking the students if they know what will happen when he does this on the board. But literally every single person in this dude's class is asleep. Fanon awkwardly laughs and then starts to change it, but Zeke tells him that due to the resistance, you actually take damage. He doesn't understand the mana transfer energy law that Fanon mentioned earlier. Fanon initially is caught off guard, but starts to get hella excited, saying that's his very first time ever getting a question. He starts to explain it all to him, and he and Zeke chat back and forth while the rest take their nap. After the class ends, they wonder why they're learning about magic theory in the first place, and another student makes the same joke I just did, saying that it's nap time. Ha ha ha, Zeke says that was an easy to understand lecture, and he's definitely no ordinary professor. Fanon then tells him to wait, and when Zeke turns, he's gassed out, asking what's wrong. Fanon says it's nothing much, he just feels like he had a proper class for the first time in a while because of him, so if he ever has anything he's curious about, to come to his research lab. He's still a Delphoa Magic University scholarship alumnus, so he knows a lot. Zeke's surprised, saying he thought he wouldn't be an ordinary mage, but to think he'd be an alum from the Magic University of Delphoa, the nation where magic originated, is pretty cool. He tells Fanon he understands and then leaves, saying there's nothing bad about getting close to a mage. Mages who are good at math are usually flexible thinkers. They're better suited as colleagues than brain-dead knights. He plans to figure out later if Fanon is actually going to be really useful. He then spots something, saying that he's less patient than he thought, as it's only been a week, and Dexter is laying down in front of him. Dexter asks him if he's done, and when Zeke goes to ask what he's doing here, Dexter cuts him off, asking why he never came to the greenhouse, saying he must have understood what he meant when he said he'd teach him some useful things. Zeke tells him that he already said he wasn't interested, causing Dexter to get annoyed, asking why. Zeke says that he can tell he's incredibly talented, but he's busy with individual training right now. Dexter laughs, saying of course he can't slack off when it comes to personal training. He then teleports behind him, asking if that's what he really thought he would say. As soon as Zeke notices, he goes to turn around, but it's too late as he gets hit with the "does this rag smell funny to you?" When he slowly opens his eyes, he says he didn't think he'd get knocked out, and a week was probably too long for Dexter. He starts to walk around, saying this must be the Western greenhouse. Dexter asks if he's fully awake, only for Zeke to ask if he abducted him. Dexter says he prefers the term surprise adoption and that he is interested in him. Zeke says he's not even hiding it now, so he must be quite impatient. Zeke then activates swift steps, starting to run away from him, saying that it's not time yet. Dexter cuts him off, jump scaring him. Zeke backpedals to create distance to find another way out, but bumps into Dexter who is now behind him. He tries once more, but again, he can't react as Dexter's hand appears in front of his face, causing him to stop in his tracks. Zeke realizes that he's being toyed with, and that he needs something to light the fire. He asks Dexter what about him has drawn his interest, and Dexter says he already told him that he was curious about how he healed instantly. Zeke starts to grin, saying that he can't believe that was actually what bothered him. He says if he's that curious, then he should make him answer him. Dexter thinks about it for a second and then disappears. Zeke has no idea where he even went. As he starts to look around, a sword flies in from seemingly nowhere. Zeke spots it and sidesteps it, but that's not all, as he grabs onto the handle, asking Dexter what he's doing. Dexter says that he told him to force him to answer, but that's too easy, so he wants to make a bet. He'll give him the same bet, the same thing that Andre gave him. Zeke says like master like disciple. Then Dexter warns him that if he gives up on this duel, he has to tell him every single thing that he is hiding. We hear the sound of something getting absolutely destroyed as we see Dexter in the middle of his greenhouse, wondering what the hell this kid is made out of, saying it's already been 3 hours. It's not that he just has good stamina and endurance, it's that his stamina and wounds are being recovered endlessly, as Zeke stands up from some rubble. Dexter says that this kid's recovery is no joke. It looks like Zeke's actually taking some damage though, as we see him wobbling. His class skills both activate, and he says that even if they went all day, he won't be able to win the bet. He says that Might of the Dragon has always seemed too dangerous to use, but against a Black Knight, that definitely won't be a problem. He Giga locks in, channeling his past life as much as he possibly can, giving it his absolute best. Dexter starts to sweat with excitement, saying that this is how he should be, and he loves what he's seeing right now. Zeke then starts to swirl the ether around his body as he activates swift steps, shattering the ground beneath him. He comes in for a swing directly towards Dexter, who sidesteps it off to Zeke's right. Dexter says he's repeating the same attacks again, and he may be fast, but compared to the Turin girl, he's nothing. As Zeke comes in with a follow-up, Dexter says that his spite surpasses tenacity, and he loves it. He then starts to take his hand out of his pocket, saying that he should use a little bit of aura here. As we see him blocking Zeke's skill, Zeke activates the Might of the Dragon, which startles Dexter to the point where he puts too much force into blocking the attack, completely shattering the blade. He then realizes what he just did, asking what that was. Zeke takes the chance to smash the dirt, blocking Dexter's vision. Dexter then starts to look around, saying it's still going to be difficult for him to find him as well. But of course, we see Zeke come out of the smoke behind Dexter, as he is using his dragon eyes, so a little bit of smoke won't stop him. He starts to swing with a broken blade, seemingly slicing through Dexter this time, but it's none other than an afterimage. The only thing left behind was his footprint, but the speed alone creates a giant gust of wind that starts to tear up the greenhouse. Zeke wonders if this is Dexter's secret move, saying that he can't believe a simple dash caused such a strong gust, asking if this is why he's known as the Gale Knight. Dexter then appears behind him, which startles Zeke as he turns to cut him. Of course, Dexter vanishes once more, appearing in front of him this time, saying that they'll just call this a draw as he puts aura into his fist. He hits Zeke in the stomach, causing him to spit up a lot of blood, and as his sword floats through the air, we see Zeke get sent flying across the greenhouse, that might have broken the sound barrier. The status window tells Zeke that due to excessive skill use, his fatigue has surpassed the acceptable limit, and that for his safety, his consciousness will be forcibly shut down. Zeke once more says that like master, like disciple, he loses consciousness as Dexter says something. He then wakes up to a familiar ceiling, and as he rises in bed, he realizes that he's in his room, wondering if Dexter brought him here. He then sighs, saying that he almost won, but as expected of a Black Knight. He did everything he could, and it was still useless, trying to get Dexter to put his guard down by repeating the same attack 100 times over and over, and at that decisive moment, making a gap using the might of the dragon, and then blocking his vision using dragon eyes, but it still wasn't enough. The skill Dexter used at the end was definitely his secret move, and while he got knocked unconscious for using the draconian skills too excessively, thanks to that, he got to see Dexter's secret move with the dragon eye, as it was a skill that he has trained his entire body to utilize to its utmost efficiency. The secret move must have been the one that allowed Andre, who was weak in stamina, to rise to the position of Red Knight. It's a shame that he lost the opportunity to learn the skill, but it was still worthwhile. Might of the Dragon gave off the pressure that had even a Black Knight hesitate, and most small fries would definitely submit the moment they are exposed to the skill. The status window then appears above his head, saying that he has an unopened message. He wonders what this means, so he opens it, and it starts to tell him that his rank D skill Swift Step has changed into the rank C skill of high-speed movement. His soul has developed due to the demonstration of his strong will, and along with the development of his soul, his system is now upgraded. It is also possible to activate the next function using karma. As we see, he now has the option for a minimap, an inventory, and a quest book. Zeke says they all seem pretty useful, but he's curious about what inventory is, so he buys it first. It tells him that if he selects the items he wants, they will be stored in the inventory, and when retrieving items, he can think of the name or shape of the item. The amount of space the item takes in the inventory is dependent on the weight and size, so if he wants a larger storage space, he can upgrade it using his karma points. Zeke looks over at his sword, picking it up, saying that if he can activate skills just by thinking of them, it must be the same for putting it into his inventory. He picks it up and starts saying save over and over. At this angle, our boy has no hope. RIP his hairline. His sword then goes into his inventory. Now that the claymore has disappeared, it took up 2 of the 28 boxes. He has the inventory system from Path of Exile. He then thinks about the claymore as it appears back in his hand, which surprises him. He says he thought of it as a subspace storage, but it's actually way better. A subspace artifact was expensive, but it was also hard to find an object stored within it, and he can even increase the space of this one by using points. He wonders how a skill so strong is still an option in the low rank status window. He wonders what will happen if he upgrades it, saying if the worth of these points is this high, then he can't just recklessly spend them. So he has to definitely come up with a better plan. Decker then asks if he can come in, which startles him, but he says yes. Zeke asks what he wants, and Decker tells him there's a message for him. He says that it's from the garden keeper Dexter. Zeke starts to smile, saying he guesses it wasn't a complete failure. Dexter says that if he wanted to challenge him again to come whenever, saying that he must have meant that it was a draw and they could redo the challenge, which means that the opportunity still remains for him to learn his skill. Decker says that he has one more thing to tell him. He found the blacksmith he mentioned before. Zeke gets excited, asking when the appointment is, but Decker tells him that there is a problem, as Galleon had refused the appointment. Zeke asks why he would do that. Then Decker tells him that Galleon no longer makes weapons, as we see him drinking away his sorrows. Zeke decides to head to Galleon's house, saying that it's been a while, and we see that the workshop's name is actually Pupner's Breath. Zeke says it sure is a grand name for a workshop. He opens the door, asking if anybody is in, only to reveal that the entire place is a mess. He explains that Galleon crafted a weapon called the Sword of Radiance, Graham. It's a masterpiece he forged as a repayment for saving his life. Fitting of the title, Blacksmith of the Soul, it was said he read the souls of the user before making their weapon. He lived up to that name, creating a sword that possessed the ability he needed the most, which allows him to replace ether with aura. He just wonders why Galleon is in this kind of state, as we see him pulling a Dexter, just straight chugging that shit. Galleon is surprised to see a kid, asking him what he's doing here, telling him to get out. Zeke says that he was always a person who had a moody temper, but it was never this bad. What happened before he met him? Zeke picks up a bucket of water on the floor, then throws it straight on Galleon. He then tosses the bucket aside, asking him if he's awake now, saying that he wants to know why his commission was rejected. Galleon then spots the symbol on his gloves and immediately starts bowing by smashing his head into his counter, saying that he's sorry for showing discourtesy. He is not taking commissions at the moment, asking how someone like him is meant to create stuff for others if he can't even make what he wants himself. Zeke says he never would have thought Galleon had a period like this, but now that he thinks about it, he was already the greatest blacksmith on the continent when he met him, and he never told him what happened in his life before that moment. He probably just didn't want to share this embarrassing story, but he can't just wait 10 years for him to come around. As Galleon starts to have an existential crisis, he tells Zeke to forgive him for showing him such a disgraceful sight. Zeke tells him not to worry, as he wishes to see some of his failures. Galleon tells him that they're in the back, as Zeke decides that since there's no helping it, he must guide him to the right path himself. They finally make it out back, and Galleon apologizes to him, saying that he shouldn't have left things so cluttered. Zeke tells him that he really doesn't care, as he finds it charming if anything, as if he's looking at a graveyard of swords. Galleon thanks him, and Zeke starts to walk forward into them. He starts picking up the swords, analyzing them, as Galleon warns him that they're very sharp and to be careful. Zeke starts throwing the swords around, saying that these are not failures at all, and they're similar qualities to the things he forged when he was named the best on the continent. He then activates his dragon eyes, saying it's just as he thought, asking him if there's a problem with his brazier. Galleon asks how he knew that, but Zeke says that he asked a question, saying he utilizes his own style of smelting, which surprises Galleon that he could tell that just from looking at the blade. Zeke says it seems as if he's mixed several materials to create a lighter and exquisite material. He picks up one of the swords and swinging it, shattering it into another one, saying that the result of that is an item of low durability. Galleon's surprised, saying that's accurate. Not only did he recognize his smelting method immediately, he even analyzed the major flaw in its cause. If it's this person, he might be able to help him. Galleon builds the courage, then says it might be a bit random, but he has something to ask of him. They head back inside as Zeke asks what he wants. Galleon tells him to take a look at this first as he lays out a blueprint on the table. While they're staring at it, Zeke says that this is Galleon's secret, which he revealed years later. It's a blueprint of a magic brazier. In his past life, he showed him because he saved his life, and he didn't want to hide anything from his savior. It's a brazier with a temperature that can be freely adjusted through magic. Zeke says that with his smelting method it would work perfectly. Galleon knew that he would recognize it immediately. Then Zeke says that since he has the full blueprints, he's curious why he's not making it. Galleon says that the most important part, the Mana Energy Law blueprint, remains, but the Magic Tower's commission fee is 10,000 gold. Zeke says that a normal 4-member family's monthly living expense is 10 gold, which must be why it took 10 years for Galleon to become the greatest, so the price is a bit crazy. Galleon then says that's why he has to ask him this, saying he's a Draker and a pure-blooded one at that. So if he were to make the brazier, he will create any commission of his for free without conditions for as long as he lives. It would be possible if he were the family's guardian knight, but it's impossible for him, even as a pure-blooded, to receive the support of 10,000 gold. But it's not like he can give up on the Sword of Radiance. But the real issue is the Mana Energy Laws. Zeke finally remembers Fanon, and laughs as he takes the blueprint, saying that he will accept the trade. And Galleon asks if he's kidding. Zeke says that he'll go ask a favor from a mage he knows, then come back and tell him when he gets the answer, and to stop drinking. Galleon starts absolutely bawling, thanking him, saying that he'll serve him for the rest of his life. As Bro is dripping snot on his shoes, Zeke barks at him to let go, heading back out to the carriage. And finally, he's heading to the research building, wondering why the Mage Tower bastards have that commission fee so high, as the structure itself is really simple. But luckily, Fanon's major was the design of Mana Energy Laws. He then looks around for his research lab, but comes to a stop as he hears the sound of someone being hit in a nearby alley. As there's a group of guys bullying someone, we then get a flashback from his past life, when Zeke was mercilessly beaten. We see him crying while apologizing to Leon for touching him at all. Leon slams his head to the ground, saying as a reward he'll give him the opportunity to clean up the land he dirtied, telling him to lick it. Zeke thanks him, while the rest all laughed. That's a memory that Zeke really hates. He can't believe they're doing this shit already. We see Leon wailing to some kid, saying that Zeke's still just the same bastard. Who cares about the golden light reaction? He can't understand why they're saying he is a pure-blooded awakened that surpassed the others, telling them to stop the bullshit as he slams this kid's head into the ground too. He says the loss against that inferior rat couldn't be helped, since there was that hit through the surprise attack before it began. But how did a bastard who beat him by luck become a pure-blooded awakener? Zeke then appears behind them, calling out to Leon, saying that it seems like he's already found a replacement for him while laughing. His face immediately turns to that of a serious expression, and he releases Aura, telling them he'll give them 3 seconds, so they better plant their heads onto the ground now. Leon is surprised to see him, saying that his arrogance has gone through the roof ever since he got his pure blood awakening, asking if he's sure he really went through one. Zeke tells him to shut up, saying he's not going to repeat himself and to drop down or else. As he's releasing a menacing aura, Leon starts to get afraid, wondering what's the deal with this pressure. He was crawling between his legs, yet he's the one who's scared now. He starts to set aside his fear with anger, asking how dare he tell him what to do, calling him an inferior bastard, and telling his men to all go attack him. As they start leaping towards Zeke, he sighs, telling them not to blame him for this as they started it. He dodges the first punch to the side, returning with a counter. The dude's surprised because he doesn't even have a chance to react, as he gets hit straight in the face, causing him to fall down. The other 2 men notice this might be a little bad as they're coming in. Zeke steps forward, uppercutting one dude, while the other guy completely misses his punch. Zeke takes the chance to grab onto his arm, using his own momentum against him, throwing him towards another one. He then dashes forward, kneeing one of the men in the face, while the other 2 just now hit the ground. To make sure they don't get back up, he dives straight down, hitting them in the stomach while dodging an attack, then counters with an upward kick to the chin. Just bodied this dude's whole crew. Leon sits there in complete fear, saying there's no way, asking if this is really the same Zeke that he knows. Zeke tells him that there's no need to be scared, and he's sure he already knows that it only hurts for a moment. Leon draws his blade out of complete fear, and we see his hands shaking, telling him to stay away, and that he'll cut him if he gets close. Zeke asks if he's really drawing his sword out of the training area, saying surely he knows what this means. Leon audibly gulps, and Zeke says in order to face the murderous intent of Leon Conrad, who had unsheathed his sword outside the holy training arena, as he starts to draw his own blade, Zeke says that he will retaliate in the name of honor while releasing an intense bloodlust. Leon starts to shiver, and Zeke says that the following battle will end once one of them is faced with death, and all responsibility lies within themselves, and the opponent takes no responsibility for the outcome to follow. Turns out the dude they were jumping is none other than Liam. Don't know why bro was letting himself get beat up like that. Zeke says it's time to continue, and Leon immediately drops his blade to the ground, apologizing, but Zeke doesn't look like he cares. Leon even starts to piss his pants, begging Zeke to live, even calling him sir. We see his entire body shivering, begging that he let him go. Zeke still has his blade ready, and he slowly lowers it, recalling his past life when he was constantly apologizing to Leon, and begging him for mercy. Zeke sighs, saying that he can't believe he was bullied by someone like this. He then swings his blade upwards. As we see blood fly from Leon, Zeke says that he'll be taking his ear as payment, as we see it on the floor. Leon then holds onto his ear while absolutely bawling, trying to stop the blood. Zeke then grabs onto his hair, saying that if his ear is reattached when they meet again, what he'll be taking next won't be just an ear, but he'll leave with his entire head. He slams his face straight into the concrete, causing blood to go everywhere. He then stands up, sighing, and as he walks away, Liam stands up, calling out to him. When Zeke turns around, Liam asks why he helped him. Zeke tells him not to worry about it, as it wasn't him helping Liam, but rather he was helping himself. As he leaves the alleyway, he wonders if maybe Galleon rubbed off on him too much, and he almost said something embarrassing out loud. He finally makes it to the research lab, asking Fanon if this will be possible. Fanon says that he'll get straight to the point, and that it is indeed possible. Zeke says in that case he'd like to leave it with him. Fanon says he'd think it would be better if he listened to his explanation first. The composition is simple, but the problem is the core in charge of power output. The core is considered the heart of this machine, but the following circuit has extremely tricky restrictions. It may be small, but it requires enough power, and they'll also need a way to adjust the output without delaying it. Zeke asks again if it's possible. Fanon replies saying yeah, there are two options. Given the condition of the core, he could personally adjust the design, however it would take at least a decade to redo it, rather 15 years. Zeke is startled by this. While Fanon says it will take an incredible amount of time, the second method is they can avoid designing the core and use an alternative material, but even though doing this would save a lot of time, the material needed is a high compression manastone. Zeke makes a pretty nervous looking expression and says that's an artifact that can't even be made with modern technology. Fanon says that's correct, as ancient relics are already rare, but finding artifacts in ruins is even harder. To come across a manastone that can withstand their design would cost over 3,000 gold. Zeke starts to wonder if this is doable, and he sighs, saying he might get kicked out if they find out he cannot use aura, but 15 years is too long. But 3,000 gold is also too high. He can't believe he has to give up on the Sword of Radiance. Most people think he's an aura user thanks to the events that occurred at the Blessing Rite, but that was merely a reaction created with ether and healing. The fact that he's unable to use aura still remains the same. Ether is considered to be a difficult power to be controlled by humans. However, excluding the skill spirit of the soul that his master taught him, he can't utilize any sword skill that requires aura. Even with that skill, he can only reinforce and swing his body around. Compared to ether, aura is easier to use and more versatile, which is why he needs that sword so bad. But he wonders how he's meant to get a high compression manastone. Fanon then says the creator of the blueprints is amazing, even taking the complicated core into account, it's an efficient design. This would be too difficult to create even among the Golden Age relics. Zeke then starts to get an idea, wondering why he didn't have this before. As soon as he mentioned that, it reminded him of something. He tells Fanon to take care of the design until he's back. Fanon asks where he's going, asking if he wants him to take 15 years to complete it. Zeke laughs, saying of course not, telling him that he'll bring one. A high compression manastone that is. Zeke explains that the Golden Age was a whole different era. The Liberation War, fought to escape the rule of dragons, ended with the defeat of the evil dragon Bahamut by Tarkhan Draker, granting humanity a century of peace. During that time, the ancient relics uncovered within the dragon's lair were the remnants of the age of the Hero King, the prime age of magic. All of the discovered relics and techniques way surpassed modern standards. Among them was the high compression mana stone, capable of sustaining the mana needs of an entire village, a relic from the age of the Hero King. At the Central Library of Draker Academy, Zeke continues explaining that despite being rarely used, the Central Library continued to be maintained as it is believed to have been established by Tarkhan himself. During the expansion of a records room, relics from the Golden Age were discovered, which led to the involvement of the Magic Tower and the Archmage of Nirvana, a member of the three great families in the excavation. During those few months, countless relics from the Golden Age were found, and news of it spread through continental newsletters. Or at least that's what would happen 10 years from now. As he heads to the library, Zeke says that nobody has discovered the relics yet, nor are they even aware of them. He sighs, saying he could look for it all day and still would never be able to find it. Then he activates his dragon eyes and starts scouring around the library. Spotting something, he says that must be it, as we see a slight reddish hue on one of the tiles. He taps on it, saying it sounds hollow, and then uses his ether to form a blade, cutting the tile out of the floor. He says this is the only ether application for the soul of the spirit scale he learned from his master. Since ether materializes at the user's will, it is possible to apply certain properties like cut and use in different scenarios. However, it has drawbacks, as the user must expend a large amount of ether to perform an action. We see he's already visibly strained, and he says that he guesses it's still too much with his body. He slowly moves the tile, revealing light. As he heads down, he covers it back on top of his head, as if he was never there to begin with. Deep inside, we see him now with a torch, and he says the newsletter never mentioned how far it went. Then he hears footsteps, which startles him, and he says it should be at least decades before somebody else finds these ruins, asking if it's possible he was somehow beaten. He then peers around the corner, only to see skeletons. He says they're holding shovels and pickaxes, which means they might have been made by a lich. He then pulls his sword out of his inventory, saying if that's the case, this should be easy as he dashes forward, instantly killing the first skeleton, then cutting through the other one's shovel, finishing it off as well. A status window then appears, telling him that for defeating 2 skeletons, he has earned 2 karma points. He low-key completely forgot that he could get this. So did I. He says it slipped his mind because he was focused on the artifact. Then he realizes something. This is a great chance to farm some points, as he turns into Lloyd. He starts running forward, saying he'll be right there, talking to his lovely points. He breaks another skeleton skull, and we see he's defeated 20 skeletons so far. He's looking at a status window, saying this is pretty easy. He has a lot more skills than what he started with, kind of crazy. He also now has 40 points, and he says that he wants to look into it more to figure out what to actually unlock. He guesses that buying the minimap wouldn't be a bad decision, so he buys that. It then pops up on the status window, and he says it's very similar to a magic map. He sees a little button on the bottom left, wondering what it is, so he taps it, as it swaps from 2D to 3D, appearing in front of him with the entire layout of the interior. He says that this is the good shit, but he wonders why only this one room is red, while the rest are not. He then taps on it, as it asks if he would like directions to the grave of the Dragonslayer's storage room. He's surprised seeing it took the search party days to find it, but he found it so fast. So he clicks yes, and then tells him it's going to show him the fastest route to the destination. He watches as the fantasy Siri guides him. He says that he can't believe the path could be this laid out for him, saying there's no way he could possibly lose his sense of direction. He finally makes it to the destination, and he wonders how he's supposed to get inside, as the door is way too damn big. He doesn't even think he could force it open. As he touches it, a red aura appears on his hand. He quickly pulls his hand away, saying that is a security spell, as we see his glove smoking. He says the reason the Magic Tower and the Archmage of Nirvana were involved must be because of this door, and that he would have lost his hand if it weren't for the gloves. He sighs, saying there's no way he can get through the spell, asking the system if they can open it for him. The system says that they have received the administrator's request, and they will contact the security device. It then says that the spell is being deactivated, but immediately says that the activation of the automatic defense was unsuccessful, and they will swap to the manual defense. Zeke then starts to sweat nervously, asking if it just responded to what he said. The system then appears, saying yes I am, asking if he has any more requests, calling him Administrator Zeke. He starts to get a whole different mix of emotions, realizing that he can talk to his system. As it's sentient, he decides to ask it why it forced him to regress, and the system says it cannot answer the question. He then asks what the system is. Of course, it can't answer that either. He asks who made it, yet again a no answer. Then asks if he has anything else he'd like to know. He sighs, saying that he can't get anything important out of it, telling them to just open the door. The system says that they have confirmed the request, and the grave of the Dragon Slayer has been opened, as the gates slowly open. Zeke looks around amazed, asking if every one of these are treasure chests, because there are so many of them. He explains that treasure chests, as if we don't know, it is a chest filled with valuable relics and treasures. Finding even a single one would be a miracle. He opens one, and it's filled to the brim with gold and jewelry, and he says there are hundreds of these things. He starts scouring through them, taking things that he likes, just dumping shit into his inventory. He says he can give this one to Fanon, and then he smiles, seeing that he finally found it, a high compression mana stone, but there's 4 of them, which is even better. He then uses his points to expand his inventory, saying that he still doesn't have enough space for everything, and he guesses he'll have to come back here regularly until he graduates. As he goes to leave, he says this should be enough today, then senses something, as there is an ominous fog all around the room now. He wonders what this creepy feeling is, as he puts his hand on the wall. It starts to pulse, and he immediately takes his hand off of it, but it's too late, as multiple magic circles have now enveloped him, and he wonders what's going on, only for him to teleport out of the room. Zeke lands somewhere else from the teleportation, asking the system where he is as he looks around. The system says that the current location of the administrator is the home of the Dragon Slayer. He says he never heard anything about a room filled with coffins in the newsletter. He opens the mini-map, which shows him that he's not too far from where he was previously. He says there isn't even a path connected here. If that's the case, it could be a hidden area that's never been found before. He decides that he can't ignore it as he starts to push one of the coffins open, revealing a suit of armor inside of it. It says that he has found the question-marked Dragon Slayer exclusive equipment. As he leans it up, he starts inspecting it, saying that it's different from the armor of the Golden Age. He spots something on the back, as there's a hole, wondering what it's for. He then pulls out one of the mana stones, saying that he can't let this opportunity pass as he installs it directly into the equipment. Its eyes then begin to light up as Zeke sweats with excitement. Because the armor starts to sway violently, Zeke wonders what's going on. The mana around it then starts to coalesce, and he realizes this isn't good. An explosion soon follows as the system says an overload caused by the equipment failure is happening, and that an explosion is going to occur in a few minutes. They suggest Zeke take cover. He says, "Bro, you're late, it already happened." The system says, "My fault, oh gee." Zeke says that it's cool that a high compression monostone is the energy source for ancient armor. He wonders what kind of features it has that require such a large energy source. He decides to ask Fanon about it later while continuing down the path. Every single room is empty until he makes it to the last room, as the only thing inside is a glass cube. The system then appears, and we see Zeke asking if it's serious. He starts to sweat, saying Terrakin was absolutely insane, as what he sees in front of him is none other than the evil dragon King Bahamut's heart, which was the legacy of Terrakin. He says he can't believe Terrakin left it here, and that explains the ominous feeling he got when he entered the storage room. But something about it seems odd, as his hand starts to move seemingly by itself. He puts his palm on the glass, as the system says the heart of the cursed dragon Bahamut is reacting to the administrator. We then hear Zeke saying, "Yes, I hear you," as he looks completely out of it. He says he had no choice, and he understands and that he will kill them all. His class skill resets his mental state, and he wonders what he means by kill them all and why he would even do that. He then pulls his hand away, revealing that his eye is completely black. As a purple fog starts to swirl around the room, he asks what this is, only for it to get more and more violent as Bahamut's heart starts to glow. Zeke yells, asking what's going on, as he is given the urgent quest Terrakin's test. He needs to defeat the curse from Bahamut's heart, and he'll have ownership over it if he does. Zeke is startled as we see his eyes still pitch black. His class skill tries to activate, but it fails as we see the system is starting to malfunction. Zeke drops to one of his knees, as all he hears in his head is a voice screaming to kill them all and to accept them, and he will be free over and over. Now both of his eyes are black. He smashes his head into the glass, saying whoever is in his head needs to shut the hell up, saying that if they'll give him freedom, that sounds stupid, because freedom is won, calling them a dumbass. The glass then begins to shatter as now a red aura is seen floating around the room, and he has won against the Light Dragon's curse. Due to completing the quest, he has been given ownership over Terrakin's gift. Zeke says that it could have been worse and he can't believe his skill failed, wondering what that was just now. His other class skills kick in, starting to heal him as he begins to absorb Bahamut's heart. A purple light appears as Zeke looks up. It shoots him directly in the chest, and he starts to feel an intense pain, asking what this is as a pure and dense source of mana is flowing directly into him. But he doesn't have any circles to accept mana to begin with. Without a place to store it, all that mana is ripping apart his body. He says that he needs to do something, or else he will die here. He then begins to release his ether using Spirit of the Soul, a skill called Seal. He starts to make some type of black hole to absorb all the mana. He says he will use the ether to cover the mana and seal it in an ether hole. A massive explosion occurs as soon as he starts absorbing it, sending a shockwave throughout the room. It's eerily quiet besides the smoke dissipating. After a bit, it gets smaller and smaller as we see Zeke finally standing up. He takes in a deep breath and sighs, saying that he guesses he lived, as there is now a hole in his chest with the dragon symbol on it. He looks around the room, saying that he low-key thought he was cooked, but the heart is gone. It looks like that mana really was from Bahamut. He then spots something, as it's none other than a reflection in the glass. He sees a dragon emblem on his chest and wonders if this occurred when he sealed Bahamut's mana. The status window then appears in front of him, saying that he has absorbed the heart of Bahamut. It continuously starts spamming him with notifications, such as that it has changed his body into that of the divine body, and they detect that he is unable to control 95% of the power. As a hereditary, he has the right to open Terrakin's secure library. He is then given a quest book and some kind of tutorial. He says this is all way too much, so Zeke needs to take his time to look at it one by one later, telling the system to get rid of all these notifications. All except for this one, as he points it out. He says it looks like his ancestor was feeling generous, as he starts to smile. It asks him if he would like to open Terrakin's other dying gift. We see Zeke staring at some kind of chest. As his heart starts to beat, he asks if this is what he thinks it is. In typical fashion, we don't get to see yet as he heads back to the Platinum Mansion, saying this should be good enough. As he puts everything into some of his lockers, he decides to take a look at his status. As we see, there is way more than there was last time. I ain't reading all of that. Zeke will bring it up when it's important. He says that authority and constitution were added, and it looks like this incantation can be unlocked once he's stronger. Authority means he has control over dragonkind, and dragons under his control can be summoned and will follow his orders. His constitution is the divine body. Now his body can perform at the highest level. His rate of learning for combat, and the transfer rate of ether in his body have increased. He says the descriptions don't really mean a lot to him. There's also that one status window that mentions Terrakin's secure library. He tells the system to open that one up, and as it does so, it says that it needs to update its information. He's staring at a blank screen, telling it to show the library already, but the system says that he needs to move to a location where an update is possible, asking if he would like to have it marked on his minimap. He's confused, asking why he needs to go somewhere else, saying sure. It then pinpoints it, and he asks why it wants him to go to Valhalla, the most prestigious knight training institution, where individuals other than the administrator are unable to view, let alone enter the area. He says that even he would have trouble entering Valhalla, as he wasn't planning on joining it. He then taps on another status window as the quest book has been activated. It appears that the tutorial for the low-level administrator will soon start. Once it is over, a quest will be given to encourage his growth, and once that is over, he will be given a reward. He says being given rewards for completing a quest sounds pretty cool, and it looks like it's similar to missions from an adventurer's guild. But he wonders what the tutorial is. They explain that the tutorial is about to begin, and he watches as the area around him starts to fade out as he is slowly taken to some other dimension. He wonders what this place is, wondering if he was teleported like before, but says it's a little different. It feels like the entire area has changed. Something else begins to spawn in behind him, and when he turns around, he sees giant orcs holding onto their weapons, growling at him. He then looks down into the status window, which says that he needs to defeat the monsters within the time frames using 2 or more different skills, and he'll get some points as well as the system store unlocked. He says that due to the sudden appearance of orcs in the quest, this must be the tutorial, and that it's trying to create situations where he can take advantage of the system. It would have been nice if he had this way earlier on, as all the orcs start to come in with their attacks. We see them hit exactly where he was standing, sending out a massive shockwave. Of course, Zeke has used swift steps to leave, but has also used continuous slash to counter, dashing past all of the orcs. We see lines appear all over their bodies, as they don't even realize it, but they are dead already. They explode into mist, and he says that this claymore feels as light as a feather, and it must be the effects of having a divine body. Even with this, he can easily defeat a purple knight. It then tells him he's completed the tutorial quest, as everything starts to fade back to reality. He realizes he's back. He asks if that was an illusion, saying it felt incredibly real. He also obtained a critical bonus and a time bonus. As a quest reward, he has obtained 40 points and access to the shop category. He's surprised he can buy items through this system, and when he opens them, he's pogging to see that every single thing in here is actually a rare relic, saying that he's just going to make a fortune by buying and reselling. He then opens his inventory to look at the sell feature, but it tells him that he cannot sell his claymore, asking if he would like to buy a weapon, showing him an elven dagger. He says that he guesses he can only sell relics back to the store, and he can't believe that this dagger is worth 4 points, as he could sell it in an auction for 100 gold, but he guesses he won't use it unless he really needs to. He dismisses the system, sighing, heading back out, saying that was a long day. The lights cut off, and he heads out, saying he needs to get a good night's sleep. The next day, at the research center, Fanon asks how he managed to get a high compression monostone within a day. Zeke says it's too complicated to explain, then says to get to the point, asking how long everything will take. Fanon says it's already complete, and Zeke says he can't believe he did it so quickly. Fanon says he's more impressed that he brought him this. Zeke starts to sip his tea, saying that Fanon must be suspicious of him. Every time high compression monostones are found within the continent, they are registered using a variety of ancient texts, and are used to manage the ownership of some of the more expensive monostones. Thus, by checking the registration number, you are able to confirm where and when the monostone was found. However, there is no way the monostone he is holding is registered, as we see what Fanon was looking through was the registration encyclopedia. Zeke says that since Fanon has the ability to suspect him rather than blindly believe him, as well as his judgment skill, he's too talented to run a place like this, and he says now that they've confirmed there is no registration number, if they can leave. Fanon's surprised that he knew. Back to Galleon's workshop, Galleon says he's going to try starting it up. We see him putting his hand in a magic circle. As it turns out, his entire brazier has already been established, and he's imbuing it with his mana to start it running. He's amazed by this, and Fanon also seems super happy with his design remodel. Fanon says that he has a lecture to go do, and they thank him as he leaves. Galleon says he didn't think he'd be able to see a completed magic brazier in his life, thanking Zeke. Zeke says it's all part of the deal, so there's no need to thank him, and he's sure he hasn't forgotten the condition he offered. Galleon says of course, and he'll make whatever he wants. Zeke then opens a chest, telling him to make this into a sword. Galleon's surprised, saying that that's a dragon's fang. Of course, it's not any other dragon but Bahamut's. He starts drooling, saying he's never seen one of this condition or size, asking where he got it. This was Tarakan's second gift. From the heart, to the fangs, it looks like he loved collecting things. He tells Galleon it's a bit complicated. Then we see Galleon shuddering off on the side, and Zeke asks what the hell is wrong with him. Galleon starts pouring snot out of his nose, saying he can't believe he's done all this for him. Then he pours all of that into straight energy, saying he's going to exceed his every expectation, and that he will create his blade even if it costs him his life. He recalls an older Galleon saying the exact same things, and Zeke tries to tell him that that was too much, and he smiles, saying that in the end he's still the same guy, and that he's more than happy with this. He tells Galleon he's going to leave it to him. He can't wait to figure out what kind of sword he'll make him, as he's looking forward to seeing the finished product. Back in Zeke's room, he says it's so much work to make his sword, and after the duel with Dexter, it's been a week since he received that note, telling him to confine him again, and that something should happen sooner or later. He then starts to feel an ominous feeling. As we see someone enter his room through the balcony, Dexter asks why he hasn't come to find him yet. Zeke starts to shiver a little bit as Dexter is releasing killing intent, telling him to speak the truth. Zeke says he can't believe this. He told him to find him if he wanted to challenge him again, and he didn't go because he had no intentions of it. Dexter immediately gets close, grabbing him by the collar, saying he told him to tell him the truth. He then starts to lift up Zeke, throwing him out of the window. Zeke hasn't even processed what's going on yet, but then he does, and starts to sweat, saying this is way too high up, and he'll definitely die if he hits the ground. He manages to flip himself upright in the air, going to grab back onto his ledge, as Dexter grabs Zeke by the throat, saying there's no way he believes that Zeke has no intention to challenge him again, and it's most likely the reverse, that he didn't come even after reading the message in the first place, as if he's trying to irritate him purposely, and that he'll give him 5 seconds and he better tell him the truth. Zeke realizes that he's just playing with him at this point. Dexter starts to count down, while Zeke laughs, telling him that he's funny. Dexter gets to 3 seconds, as Zeke says that he has yet to reveal his identity to him. Dexter keeps counting, and Zeke asks if he's wrong, saying his name Dexter in a very sarcastic tone. Dexter starts to smile, and then throws him back into his room, cracking the ground beneath Zeke as he bounces, even making him hit the wall. Who's going to repair this? Dexter says that he's right. He was once a Black Knight of Draker, and he formally introduces himself as Duke Draker, which is what we'll call him from now on. Zeke starts to respectfully greet him, saying for disrespecting a member of the family, and to an honorable Black Knight, he wants to apologize from the bottom of his heart. Duke asks if he was planning this, and Zeke says that he wasn't, but he wants to know more about him being a Black Knight. Duke says it's not important, as that was a long time ago. Zeke asks if that's really possible, saying he's aware that you can rise in ranks, but he doesn't think you can drop them. Duke says that he would like to move on from this conversation, and he spots Duke's fingers trembling. He says he understands, and since he told him the truth, he would like to tell him the truth as well. A bit later, we hear Duke saying that means he already knew about his identity, asking if he bothered him to become his official disciple. Zeke says that's correct, and Duke says that he can't believe his boldness. He slaps his knee, saying that he'll accept him as his disciple if that's what he wants. Zeke's surprised that it was that easy, saying that he better accept before he changes his mind. Then he starts to hit him with the whole spiel, which I ain't reading. Duke doesn't want to listen to you either, but Duke does say not many people use vows anymore. Zeke says that culture is a necessary virtue of a knight. Duke calls him sly, and Zeke says he'll take it as a compliment. However, he has one thing he wants to know, calling him master. Duke says that calling him master is embarrassing, and Zeke asks what made him accept him as his disciple. As Duke's is famous for not accepting them. Only Andre, the genius of the century, became his disciple after years of asking, so why would he accept Zeke so readily? He does have a general idea, as during the duel, he must have seen that his potential surpasses that of Andre. Duke then asks him why he thinks he did it, telling him to take a guess. Zeke, thinking he understands, says it's because he's a genius of his family. Duke starts laughing, saying that confidence of his is something else. If that was the case, he would have chosen the girl from the Turin family. He likes his tenacity. Talent is not the only thing you need to reach the level of a red or black knight. Actually, because those individuals never faced issues, they fall easily in the face of adversity. Zeke realizes that's true, saying that most praised geniuses who were projected to reach the level of red knight not only fail to reach it, but always stagnate at the level of blue. Duke says he's done with the talking for now, and tells him to follow him for his first lesson. They head to the Western Greenhouse Gymnasium, and Zeke says he never knew there was a gym underneath the greenhouse. He wonders what he is planning, as he's been running since he told him, but it's already been 3 hours straight. Duke then yells to stop, and Zeke asks if he has to run anymore. Duke says he needs to ask him one thing, and Zeke tells him to go ahead and ask it. Duke appears behind him, saying that it's nothing much, as he grabs onto Zeke's wrist, but Zeke fights his hand off on pure instinct and backpedals away, creating distance. Duke looks down at his hand, asking if Zeke has a problem with him checking his pulse. Zeke's sweating nervously, and Duke says he knew something was off from the start, when they fought in the healing room and in the greenhouse. Even after running for 500 laps, he doesn't sense a single drop of aura from him, and he stopped him from checking his pulse. He asks him the hard-hitting question of if he can even use aura to begin with. Duke says that he's sure he saw that the bronze statue reacted and there was the never-before-seen golden light too. And if that's not the case, what other reason would Zeke have for not letting him examine his pulse? Zeke glares at him, saying it's not suspicion, just simple curiosity. Despite this serious situation in which a Draker can't use aura, he guesses that Duke's curiosity comes first. He's lucky that only Duke's caught on. If he can just get his hand on Graham, he won't have people suspicious of his aura. So he'll just have to be cautious until then. There's no need for him to go on spouting lies. So he takes off his gloves, telling Duke that he's correct. As he starts making the lights flicker on and off with his skill, he says that this is proof of his pure-blooded nature, but for some reason, he can't use aura. Zeke says that this will definitely cover up his lies, and he tells Duke that he's sorry for earlier, and if it's found out that a Draker can't use aura, then he'll be chased out and scared. Zeke says that he needs to put on an Oscar-worthy performance to get him out of this mess. After Duke checks his pulse, Zeke asks him how it is, and Duke's lost in thought, saying that he seemed to act unbefitting of his age, but he guesses that he's still a child in the end. But why is it that he can't sense any aura despite him awakening successfully? He starts to think about what could cause it. Zeke says that he can't be certain even after examining his pulse, because that's how the blessing right is for a Draker. Even if it's not the truth that he cannot awaken to aura, he'll find a reason to deny it himself. Duke says that he thinks it's because he is an irregular. Zeke says that that's the only natural conclusion. If you aren't aware of the concept of classes, it's a natural way to think. Zeke asks him what that is, and Duke says that it's just like it sounds. It's a term used to refer to those with abnormal abilities. For example, the ability to use aura and mana together, or an irrational ability like peering into the future. As such, irregulars are not treated very well, so don't tell anybody about this. Zeke asks why he thinks he's an irregular, and Duke says that it's because he has insane stamina and recovery. Regardless of how light the injury is, treating internal wounds takes time. However, Zeke recovered instantly, and he sure took an unspeakable amount of energy, asking what he thinks that energy is. Zeke says it's probably aura, and Duke says that it's due to being consumed at a constant rate in exchange for stamina and regen. There's none left, which is his hypothesis. Zeke says that's actually pretty damn plausible, and asks if he'll never be able to use aura then, saying that he will be able to meet his master's expectations. Duke laughs, telling him not to worry about that, as Gale Arts doesn't use aura at all. A special art is a special technique personally developed by a knight that has reached great heights. Normally it's an application or specialization of dragon slaying, so it would be proper to use aura. But his Gale Arts only requires a trained body, and he'll show him a demonstration, telling him to watch carefully. He lightly taps the ground, only to shatter it as he dashes around the room at insane speeds, and Zeke does his best to keep up with him. Duke leaves footprints all around the arena to show him where exactly he's gone. He then stops in front of Zeke, asks him if he caught that, and Zeke says he would just like to try to follow his footsteps. Duke asks if that means he'll be fine if he doesn't show him again, and Zeke says this is more than enough. Duke laughs, saying his confidence is at least that of a black rank knight, telling him to give it a go. Zeke crouches down, and then locks in. He matches Duke's footsteps, perfectly dashing around the room like he did, only landing where he stopped. Duke looks surprised, and Zeke says that now he's directly mimicking his movements. He can see something he didn't before. It's clear that these steps were taken as if he was sparring against someone, showing that he's attacking, dodging an attack, closing the distance, and increasing it. Each and every step has a purpose behind it. He then comes to a stop. Duke's in disbelief, saying it's not like he wasn't gifted a week ago, but he was not nearly this good, and he wonders what happened during that 1 week, as it's the difference of heaven and earth. He starts grinning from ear to ear, saying that he's perfect. Zeke acts all cocky, saying that this is surely proof that his confidence is enough for him to have the confidence of a black rank. Duke gets a little annoyed, saying that he could only stop after he's so arrogant, and says that he was just crying his eyes out. Now look at him. Zeke asks if he's going to spread the word around, and Duke says that depends on his attitude. Zeke asks what kind of black knight has a loose tongue, and then jumps to the dining hall. Love the banter. It then jumps to the cafeteria as Zeke has a whole plate of food, saying it's already been a month since he began training with Duke. His appetite continues to increase, then somebody comes beside him, and it's none other than Andre, asking if he has some time to spare. He says he's busy, so they can just do it here. Andre sits down, asking how he convinced Duke. Zeke keeps eating, saying that he sure does like getting to the point, and since Andre hasn't become his disciple yet, the news about him becoming his disciple must have made him a bit anxious. Thought he was his disciple, my bad, and that he didn't really do anything, and Duke just picked him on his own. Andre looks displeased, asking if it's because he's a pure blood. Zeke asks what he means, then puts his utensils down, saying it seems like he has quite the inferiority complex. Andre asks if that's all he has to say, but Zeke says he's not even halfway done. Of course, even if the reason he took him in is simply because of the bloodline, there's no way he believes Duke is a man that would pick a disciple for such a simplistic reason. The fact he was able to use that intrigue as a foundation to become his disciple is a testament to his own abilities. Instead of wasting his time patting his ego with that inferiority complex, he needs to put in some real damn effort and stand out on his own. Back at the Western Greenhouse Arena, we see all three of them there, and Duke and Zeke are watching Andre run. Zeke asks him what's wrong, and Duke says that's what he wants to ask, saying he doesn't know what got into Andre, but he came begging, saying that he's fine with being a servant as long as he can stay by his side. He said that he could take him in if he ran 300 laps without aura, which is how he ended up like this. Zeke says he thought he was just a dude suffering with insecurity, but turns out he has quite the backbone. We then see all the students of the Draker Academy outside in the courtyard wondering why they are summoned here. Another student tells them all that today is the day of the Patriarch's visit. As some horses arrive and a very fancy carriage approaches, a man yells that the Patriarch is entering. Lardass tells everyone to get ready, and they wait for the carriage to come to a stop. As it does, some knights open the door as a man steps out, telling Howard it's good to see him again. Howard greets him, and the man starts to walk through as everyone pays their respects. Dude exudes raw power. The clock strikes 12 and it starts ringing. The Patriarch continues walking forward, sticking his hand out, patting Howard on the shoulder, saying he's always so hard working. Howard says it's nothing compared to him. The Patriarch says he's the only one who truly understands. We are introduced to Arthur Draker, Zeke's father. Howard says the sunlight is rather hot, asking why they don't go inside. Arthur puts his hand up to stop him, and all the students start pogging out of their gourd. As he steps up on a hill, he stretches his hand out, calling out to all the young dragon slayers, saying they are the hope and future of the Drakers. They need to train hard and hone their development, as whatever they achieve will be achieved in the name of the Drakers. They all yell yes sir, getting on one knee and bowing to him. Arthur then tells Howard they can go now. Inside of a room, we hear Zeke doing the most formal of formal greetings to his father. Arthur laughs, saying nobody does this greeting anymore, telling him to take a seat. He says he heard he liked tea, so he prepared something rare. Zeke thanks him and then wonders how he knows which food he likes as well. There is a saying that there may be things the Emperor doesn't know, but that there will never be anything a Draker does not. That saying feels real now. Arthur says he called him to come because he heard the Duke took in a disciple. Zeke says that everybody likes getting straight to the point, and he laughs nervously, telling him that the Duke did him a great favor. Arthur says that seems to be true, and he doesn't know what his goal is, but if he is to follow Duke's teachings, Zeke cuts him off, saying that it is to be the strongest man on the continent. Arthur's gaze switches to a serious one, and Zeke tells him that he will become stronger than anybody so that he can live just as freely. Then he sets down his tea, saying that is his goal. He starts smiling, wondering what Arthur is going to do in response. Arthur releases an incredible amount of pressure, saying that means he plans to surpass even him. The pressure is really intense to the point it makes Zeke sweat a ton. Even the button on his uniform falls off, and he says that this is Astral Sword. It is said to give you power over all living beings within its radius. He starts to grin, saying that it is the pinnacle of aura, something that only Black Knights can reach. Arthur starts to laugh, as Zeke is looking up at him, full of confidence, saying of course. Arthur looks proud and then starts to raise his tea glass, releasing his aura while taking a sip. He says that is the most interesting thing he has heard in ages, and that he has come to support both the Academy and him, but he doesn't think that will be enough. Zeke says that this is what a real Black Knight's power is like, and that he thought Duke was impossibly strong, but Arthur is on a whole other level. Arthur puts a card on the table, saying that this is a gift for becoming Duke's disciple, and tells him that it is a black card. Zeke looks shocked. Arthur says it seems like he already knows what it is, while Zeke explains that it is a credit card only given to a very select few, and he didn't think that he would ever be able to see one in person. Just having this with him gives him incredible benefits, and it doesn't even have a limit. Arthur tells him that it is under both of their names, so he can use it freely. Zeke thanks him, saying he will only use it when necessary, and he is making it seem like he is being nice, but his intentions are obvious. Using a credit card leaves a record, so he just wants to keep a better track of what Zeke is really up to. If this is his method instead of opting for the Black Marshal Squad, that means he doesn't see him as a threat. Arthur says that he shouldn't waste any more of his time, as he's sure Zeke is busy with training to become the strongest, telling him that he is excused. Zeke bows once more to him and heads out. As he walks down the hallway, we hear Duke sighing. As Arthur is sitting in the chair, Duke tells him that he is sickening. Arthur asks him why he is angry, and Duke says that he is suddenly playing father for a kid that he has neglected this entire time. Arthur says he knows that he has no choice as the head of the household, and what he said counts as defamation of his character. Duke laughs, telling him to take him away then, and Arthur says that he is the only one he can talk to without worries. As he uses some kind of subspace pouch to pull out some really fancy liquor, asking him if he wants to get sloshed. Duke looks hella happy, saying that it's a red dragon's breath, and he sure does have good taste. Arthur asks him if he knows about how the atmosphere on the continent has been really strange. Duke says he's been here in the academy the entire time, so how is he meant to know that? Arthur tells him to stop acting dumb, and Duke says that just means he asked for his answer when he already knew what he would say, calling him a snake. Duke says the Emperor has gone crazy over the idea of immortality and is looking everywhere. Arthur asks if he thinks it's possible, and Duke says as if magic can make you look young, but immortality is not possible. Arthur says that he believes the same, however, what if the relic he is looking for is something related to the Elder Dragon? Duke's surprised. For those of you who don't remember, that's the relic Zeke stole.